I'm Steph Wright. I'm the project manager for the Cancer Innovation Challenge. We are here today to launch the phase 1 projects for our first funding competition. We have 5 companies that have progressed through to phase 1, and it's also an opportunity for them to engage with various relevant stakeholders to help ensure the success of their projects. Today hopefully will be an interesting day with lots of speakers and lots of discussion sessions to help the projects on their way.
So I've been able to support the Cancer Innovation Challenge, to work with our colleagues across the NHS, and importantly with 3 of our innovation centres, Data Lab, DHI and Stratified Medicine, to bring forward exciting opportunities for a lot of people, many of whom are in this room, to contribute to the use of data in cancer care and the support of patients and clinicians. So this event today is particularly exciting. Now, I have to admit, I'm a physicist by background, so even remembering what PROMs and PREMs stand for, let alone the details of what you might be talking about today, is challenging for me. But it is, the bit I have graphed in my simple mind is that these information systems, these uses of data, place the patient very centrally, and the importance of the patient in this these data sets is hugely important, and therefore what better place for us to be investing time, effort and a modicum of money than to look at the opportunities of data in that very, very important space. So for the support of patients and clinicians, we're busy. And that's a really, really great thing. So today we have a couple of purposes. We are, of course, celebrating the success of 5 fantastic companies who have been given the opportunity to work in this area, to work with the community in these areas. And so in addition to celebrating those companies, we're bringing you all together here today to give those companies and the wider stakeholder community to get busy collectively, to support those companies in the ways in which they might bring forward propositions that are of value to us, to learn from each other's experiences, and to ultimately make a significant difference to patient outcomes in Scotland through the use of data. For us at the Funding Council, it's immensely important that what lies behind and around the activity in this room and in the work that will go forward here is a community of Scotland's world-leading academics. So world-leading academics working with our colleagues across the NHS, working with the commercial world, patient groups, stakeholders from elsewhere. What could possibly go wrong? That's a fantastic and world-beating team. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy the events of today. I hope that today is constructive. I expect it will be. My interaction with the Cancer Innovation Challenge events so far was breathtaking. I went to the Data Dive event, the Product Forge ran for us some months ago, and goodness me, the energy, the ideas, the expertise that was brought into that room, and the enthusiasm for helping data to make a big difference to patients' lives was palpable. I'm sure that both the people from the commercial world here and colleagues from across the academia and NHS will bring the same energy, the same enthusiasm and the same commitment to the work around PROMs and PREMs that we'll be starting here today. So I wish you all the very best for a constructive day. I'll hand you over now to Steph, who will lead you through what will happen today, but I wish you all the very best and I look forward to keeping in touch with progress as you get on. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm just going to do a very quick thing just to give you an outline of what's happening today, so you kind of know what's going to be on the schedule. So, so the agenda, everyone should have an agenda on their chair. If you don't have one, put your hand up and I'll go get you one. No, we're all good. I have lots of apologies from people as well, unfortunately, but the best excuse is, I believe, Roy from Dockerbo can't make it because there's a scorpion on his plane that's delayed his flight. No, seriously, that is generally the thing. I'm sure Adrian will tell you more about it. Yeah, so here's the agenda for the day. We're going for quite an informal layout here. It's, you know, the key idea is for you all to interact with the companies and for the companies to interact with you. So there's a lot of discussion sessions scheduled for the day. We have a few presentations just to kind of give you kind of the bigger picture of things, but you'll see on your attached to the agenda there's a delegate list of lots of people that I hope you can all connect with each other, especially for the companies. So Just a quick outline of what phase 1 means, these 5 companies here. So they're a 3-month feasibility study, and they all officially started on the Friday just gone, on the 1st of September. We put out a media release today. I believe the Press and Journal has actually picked it up, so that's great. Stuart's delighted to be quoted in it. But for our 2 companies from Sky and Elgin, you should hopefully pick that up later today. We have 5 projects of up to £25,000 each, and at the end of it, they will pitch for phase 2, which is a further £100,000 in January 2018. The 5 companies are here. They're all alphabetical. So Docabo from Surrey, My Clinical Outcomes from London, PX Healthcare from London, Sidekit Health from Isle of Skye, and Open Brolly from Elgin. So I just want to highlight the discussion groups element of it. Everyone will see on their badge you have a colored spot. The colored spot is just to help with getting you to your first discussion topic. There are 4 discussion topics. Everyone will move around every 15 minutes on the discussion topic. So everyone will get a chance to contribute to the discussion on each of the topics. But if you could please start with the color that's on your badge. That way, not everyone goes to one table. There's one table at the back. That's the red table, where Dave is. And then the other 3 tables are in the room next door. You'll see the round tables are kind of small, so you'll kind of need to like squeeze around. But like I said, informal and chatty. So yeah, there we go. And some housekeeping. There's no fire drills planned. If there is one, it's real. And go no, actually, there's stairs just outside there that go down into the reception, and then you just head outside. The staff will obviously come in and help evacuate us too. And the bathrooms are just outside, and lunch will be served outside. And the plenary sessions will be filmed. Jakub over there at the back will be making a video recording of the event, and he'll take general footage of the discussions. He won't be filming the individual discussion groups. He'll just film the feedback bit at the end of it. So don't worry, you won't have a camera stuck up your face while you discuss things, so please feel free to discuss. And if you really don't want to be on the video recording of the event, please let Jakub know. But I think that's it. We're on Twitter, so if you're on Twitter, please do follow us. And yep, and that's me. And so the first presenter we have today is Dr. Peter Hall, and he's the clinical lead for this funding call for the Cancer Innovation Challenge. So I'll hand you over to Pete. Would you like to...
Thank you, Steph, and thank you for the opportunity to give you a bit of clinical context and background to the call today. Can you hear me okay? So, for those of you who attended the launch of the call, you may remember John. I introduced you to John. He's a 72-year-old gentleman. He has a diagnosis of advanced kidney cancer, and he's on treatment with a drug called pazopanib. This is a relatively newly released drug, fairly expensive. It needs intense monitoring. It can come with side effects, and it involves fairly complex coordination of his care, with reviews at least every 6 weeks. He finds it difficult to get to the GP, so he relies on the cancer centre, which is about 30 miles away from where he lives, for the majority of his care on this drug. And it interrupts his holiday plans repeatedly. He's told by his doctors, his clinical team, that it's helping him. He's had lots of scans which show that his cancer is stable, but he is getting some side effects, although he doesn't like to complain about these too much. And he's repeatedly told that this is an effective drug. In fact, the clinical trials show on average a 2-month survival advantage for people on this drug in his situation. So it's people like John that we need to help with this project. So, just to give you a bit of background with regards to how Scotland hopes to help people like John, the cancer strategy published last year focuses very much on outcomes. So, looking at reduction in inequalities around outcomes, or using variation in outcomes to help us understand how we can manage care better. We're going to assess how we're doing using various methods, but using or heavily relying on the quality performance indicators, which are a series of metrics produced in Scotland against which we can assess historically mainly processes of care, but in the future we hope more looking at outcomes, how patients are actually doing. The Montgomery report was published last year, which looked at the Scottish Medicines Consortium process around how we assess and evaluate new medicines and technologies. And one thing that was very prominent in that report was that we need to be using real-world data for assessing new treatments and their benefits, including patient-reported outcomes. And there's a big move in Scotland at the moment towards realistic medicine. So are the benefits from treatments, are they worthwhile, and do they meet the needs of the patients that we're trying to treat? So let's think about outcomes. So what do we mean by outcomes? So clinical outcomes are very variable. There's a wide range of things. So ultimately, outcomes are what we use to measure how patients are doing. And this spans from objective measurables like recurrence rates or cancer progression rates, right across to more subjective things like are patients comfortable, are they managing to maintain a normal life, see their family, etc. Ultimately, all of the outcomes that we look at can be summarised either by contributing towards helping our patients live longer, survival, or helping improve their lives, quality of life. Arguably, any other outcome is a sub-domain of those two outcomes. So we're pretty good at measuring survival. We've got good quality death certificate registration in Scotland, but quality of life is more difficult because ultimately, if we're going to measure quality of life, we need to ask patients how they are. So patient-reported outcome measures is essentially a suite of tools or outcome measures that we use to measure quality of life and its dimensions. We use them to capture a person's or a patient's perception of their health. In order to do so in a valid and a reproducible way, we need to use accepted and validated tools to do this. And these can either be generic tools, which are applicable to anybody with any type of disease, or we have perhaps more detailed or sensitive tools which look at specific diseases such as cancer or particular types of cancer. And these measures can measure anything from symptoms to broader concepts such as distress and quality of life. So here's an example of a PROM. This is the EQ5D, which is used as the basis of quality adjusted life year measurement for entities like the Scottish Medicines Consortium. This includes a visual analogue scale, which simply asks patients on a scale of 0 to 100, how is their health today? And that gives you a simple score that we can use to monitor quality of life over time, or at a single point in time. Traditionally, this is how we've collected patient-reported outcome measures using questionnaires that we give to patients. Most tools that we have been developed through in the environment of randomized controlled trials or clinical research. And these are often, there's a whole science behind how these tools have been developed and what they can measure, which we can draw on. Increasingly in the future, we're looking towards better ways of capturing PROMs, so moving from questionnaires to more technologically sophisticated or accessible mechanisms for measuring PROMs. PREMs, I guess I think of as a sort of subdomain or parallel category to PROMs, so patient experience measures. Essentially, this is the traditional satisfaction survey or looking to try and understand how patients experience the service rather than necessarily how patients are in themselves. So I'd just like to introduce you to two main use cases, I suppose, where we can derive value from PROMs. So the first is cohort analysis, or the study of aggregate data. And the second is for individual patient care. So when thinking about cohort analysis, this is essentially population type analysis. So this might be, for example, where we look to study variation in outcomes across a population or subpopulation, for example, in the context of quality performance indicators. And we can use this to assess variation, measure outcomes over time, trends as they change over time, and help us understand how our patients are doing at population or aggregate level. We can also use cohort analysis to ratify the value of service change or adoption decisions for new technologies that we've made in the past, if we can start to capture data in the real NHS. What this kind of analysis ultimately relies on is the ability to access the data that's captured in aggregate form. So to do this, we need data captured for individual patients to flow into national data sets so that they can be analysed and interpreted alongside all the other data that we have that describes patients' care and their outcomes, including, for example, the cancer registry, the really rich Scottish morbidity record that we have in Scotland, chemotherapy prescribing data, and other service data, including audit data. And I think colleagues will describe the national efforts to improve our data infrastructure in Scotland. Second use case, individual patient care. Potentially very exciting, but also potentially very challenging. We used to a process by which we assess patients at points in time and act on the information to improve their care on the basis of those assessments. If we can include patient-reported outcomes in our ability to assess patients, then that will objectify and enhance our ability to understand how patients are and tailor their care accordingly. For example, by assessing PROMs at intervals, monitoring on and off treatments or after treatments, looking for side effects or trying to understand better how patients are. If we can collect PROMs for individual patients, then information can be fed back to the clinical team and can change patient care potentially in real time. We're used to using information in our clinical assessments of patients on and after treatments all the time. This is how we operate in clinical medicine. So blood tests, for example, we will typically have a portfolio of blood tests that we will use that helps us describe organ function and toxicities from treatment over time. If we could add patient-reported outcomes or patient-reported symptoms to this, then this would really enhance the breadth of information that we have at our disposal to help us make decisions with our patients. But if we're going to use this sort of information, it needs to be accessible to clinicians and the healthcare team at the point of care delivery. So this is an example of an electronic patient record that we use in Scotland on a day-to-day basis to access information about our patients. We can bring up blood tests, other clinical assessments. Ultimately, if we're going to make use of routinely collected patient-reported outcomes, then they need to be accessible through the same mechanism. In a 10-minute consultation, a doctor or a nurse is going to struggle to log into and bring up another symptom to access patient-reported outcomes information alongside the existing systems that they have to use. So finally, if we're going to start to use things like the collection of patient-reported outcome information for routine care, then, as with any other intervention in medicine, we need evidence that it's effective and safe before we start to use it. And the last couple of years have seen a bit of a breakthrough around this. So this is a study conducted in the US by a group led by Ethan Bash, an oncologist in the US. So he ran a single-center randomized pilot study which looked at patients who are undergoing chemotherapy for the treatment of a variety of different types of cancer. And essentially what this trial did is it compared the current standard care method of monitoring and assessing side effects and toxicities on chemotherapy with a new system or a new way of operating which involved an electronic system to monitor or allow patients to monitor and feed back their side effects and toxicity over time, allowing feedback to the clinical care team. So this essentially enabled a move from the traditional reactive method of responding to side effects and problems on treatments. So patients at home, they develop a side effect, they phone the healthcare team, they're brought up to hospital for assessment, etc. So using the so-called active symptom monitoring system, patients filled in on a daily basis or in response to e-reminders, information about their side effects from treatment. That information flowed back to the system. If a particularly worrisome side effect was identified, there was an alert set to the clinical team, and the clinical team was able to access reports of toxicity over time on treatment. Patients filled in or assessed their own toxicity using a self-reporting interface like this. And this is an example of an email alert to the clinical team alerting them to a particularly worrisome side effect, shortness of breath, which had developed. And the clinical team gets a report every time they assess the patient to enable them to understand the trajectory of side effects over the previous treatments. And what the study showed is that the use of this real-time reporting system led to improved quality of life in patients on chemotherapy and reduced emergency hospital attendances. And then the sort of headline results from this study were reported at the annual ASCO conference in June this year. And in fact, the use of this system they demonstrated resulted in an average of 5-month improvement in survival for these patients. And this was really headline news at that conference. We're used to seeing these sorts of survival gains, or perhaps even less, with a variety of new, super expensive, technologically advanced cancer medicines which are coming through. But that 5-year survival gain for many types of advanced cancer is seen as a breakthrough for many types of cancer drugs. So to see this from a simple, potentially much cheaper intervention based on sensible use of technology through patient-reported outcomes is really gives us hope that we can make a huge difference in doing the sorts of things that we do with this work. So what do we need? So we need a solution that enables patients to be identified, either groups of patients or individuals, and for responses to be gathered from regarding patient-reported outcome measures, and for the results to be captured. We need flow into both national data sets for cohort analysis and also into electronic records for individual patient care purposes. What we don't need is to be told what sorts of PROMs to be used. So there are others doing work around helping us work out what sort of patient-reported outcome measures are helpful to be captured and how to capture them. And essentially any mechanism that we develop to help us capture these patient-reported outcome measures, it needs to be able to stand the test of time as evidence develops as to what to collect and how to use that information. And what we really don't want is for clinicians to have to log into another system during their consultation. There will be lots of considerations, and I think we'll probably expand on during as the day goes on, around the information of governments, compatibility with existing NHS systems, compatibility with the clinical team and patients. And also, we need to be, I'd really like us to bear in mind the national framework that we hope to enhance around policy making and national analysis. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Do you want to take any questions right now, or shall we just leave it for informal discussion later? Okay, we'll leave that till later. Thank you. And next we have Joanne Nolan from the Scottish Government. Let me load this up for you.
Right. Okay, so just to set a little bit of the context, Scottish Government have been working with NHS Scotland to develop a number of technical strategies around e-health since 2008. That was our first publication for the strategy, 2008-2011. And we've progressively been developing that further until we've reached a current strategy which ends this year. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at that. Our current strategies have mainly been focused around the development of the clinical portal, the electronic patient record, and concentrating largely towards the latter end of it around access to reports and information to help support decision making. We're moving into a new context now, away from concentrating just on e-health with adult health and social care integration. And our new strategy that we're working on at the moment is going to be more focused on digital health and social care integration. So that's going to be our next strategy. What we will seek to deliver within this strategy is building on some of the work that we did with the electronic patient record, and to make that a lot more accessible, including making it more accessible to the patients. So we're looking for the strategy to be more placing the citizen in the centre of information sharing. Better use of data for decision support and planning and research purposes. And starting to develop a digital ecosystem around the individual and placing them in the context of home. So how do we do that in terms of the architecture components to support this? Well, if anybody, I'm not sure if this is so clear at the back, so I'll just kind of see if I can explain a little bit clearer. If anybody's had a look at the strategy that's currently available on our website, it's changed significantly since 2008 in terms of some of the additional layers of the architecture that we're introducing here. At the very top end, in terms of the services that we are delivering, previously we were focused on delivering electronic patient records to clinicians. Now we're looking at to extend that to the wider healthcare professionals, the citizens themselves, social care practitioners, as well as information for research purposes and third sector organisations. So actually our services will be delivered to a much wider audience in the future. And with a further range of presentation layers as well to help us deliver that. But one of the key focuses that we are trying to pull out through our strategy is that layer of how we're delivering these services to a wider range, wider audience, the information layer that we need to build on in order to present that information to the people, and the interoperability layer that we are planning to extend, that wraps around all of how we actually take the information from our vast multiple amount of systems and be able to present it in different ways. So concentrating first of all on the information layer, we have two strategies that are available just now that we are actually using as a framework to help us deliver this. The first one on the side here is the data management strategy, a data vision for Scotland. And the second one is the health and social care information sharing strategic frameworks. Now these strategies give us that key focus on how we're actually going to reuse data that we have within our systems and how we're going to open up access to these to that data for the purpose of research, and what type of open standards and solutions that we will put in place. In terms of the interoperability layer, what we're looking for here is that we want to move away from bespoke ways of sharing information, which we have within our systems at the moment. We're making a concerted move towards more international standards. So we're encouraging more developments using FHIR, which is an HL7 standard, and IHE. If anybody wants any more information on what these standards are, please come speak to me after the presentation. We're looking to build on some of the APIs that we use, particularly in the primary care arena, where we're looking to work with NHS Digital and some of the open APIs that they're developing, along with the primary care suppliers. We're looking to actually tap into some of these resources there so that we can get more standard and national type standards and how we actually access information from primary care systems. We need to build on some of the terminology services that we have with agreed set of data definitions. That's taking things like our current electronic patient record, trying to look at how we can standardise that information content throughout NHS Scotland, and how we can actually then develop it further to make it more accessible to patients in the future. And in order to do this, the one key thing that we're going to need here is a flexible architecture to respond to that different information sharing needs of all these different approaches. So how do we do that? Well, key to the information sharing that we're developing just now is the CI architecture. CI is our electronic master patient index within Scotland. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have one identity for all patients in Scotland. We're replacing our current architecture at this point in time with more kind of real-time update kind of processes. So our CI infrastructure at the moment will have the demographics for every patient. It holds out all patients' demographic information. It produces a matching index. It's got the audit log and the policy store for about how we match and how we can actually pull records together. Wrapped around that is obviously a security layer and the messaging standards that are coming out of CI at the moment using IHE profiles, PICS, BDQ, XDS. So these are the kind of new standards that we're moving to within our master patient system. Surrounding that, when we present CI in this context, it's more like a health information exchange. So this is a way that we can actually get information moving so that we match on identity. First of all, we know who it is we're talking about. And once we've established the identity, we use that CI number to help us match to all documents and information that's available on that patient. So the way we do this, the way we're planning to do this, is that we will have a national integration platform here that will take these standards and be able to talk to our line of business systems, our, things like SkyStore, Track, Portal, and the GP primary care systems. A record locator service is going to be the key tool that works with the CI number in order to retrieve documents and data about the patient. So this is kind of core to our architecture in order to get information that's about the right patient and the right information throughout, no matter where the information is located in any system throughout the NHS estate. The other development we're working on at the moment is the patient portal. I think this development is going to be key to how you deliver the PROMs and PREMs solution, because this is going to be our patient-facing part of eHealth. We've agreed we're at the start of developing a patient portal with NHS Scotland, so we've started off with agreeing some key fundamental principles. We aim to do this once for Scotland, so there will only ever be a one patient portal. And it'll be a health and social care portal, so at the moment we're concentrating on providing health information to citizens, but we will over time work with social care to actually deliver that more joined up health and care information to the citizen. So we will do it one for Scotland. That means that the fundamental underpinning this is that we will have the same set of services, the same access to the same information, no matter where the citizen lives throughout Scotland. They will have the same user experience. So they say every time that they engage with NHS Scotland via the patient portal, they will be delivering the same type of service. They will see it all operate in the same kind of process. And it's something that we will start small, we've got very localised proof of concept going on at the moment, but we're building the architecture in a way that we add services over time. But most importantly, that some of the key things that we're delivering at the start is that authentication, that the citizen will log on to the patient portal using the My Account services. So that way they can share their log-on details with council type staff or with health. So they've got that one way of logging in throughout Scotland. And we will be developing this using standards. So I just want to quickly, I'm not sure if that's very clear at the back, apologies for that. I think, Steph, you plan to share these later. But please come speak to me later if you want a little bit more information about what we're doing here in the patient portal. But fundamentally what this diagram is showing here is at the front, over the internet, the citizen will log in through My Account and access the Health and Social Care portal website. And that website, they will be presented with public-facing information, the content about, long-term conditions that might be more relevant to them. As you see, we have lots of fire resources. That's the standards that will be used to presenting that information to the citizen. And this is the platform. It's more than just a patient portal. We're building a digital platform to enable not only just content and data that's available to the citizen, but there will be lots of services, that it's for devices as well, sharing information with devices along with, taking information out of our back-end systems and presenting them in that way to the patient. So in this diagram, the services that are in white are the services that we are delivering at this point in time in the proof of concept, but with an ambition to actually deliver a lot more services as time goes on. So we're looking at authentication first of all, making sure that we know the citizen logging on is the citizen that we have held within our CI database. So we'll deal with that first of all. We will have a person-held file service there. That's building on the work that we've done with clinical portals, electronic patient record, and delivering this more patient-focused type of information that the patient wants to see of their medical records, and being able over time be able to allow the patient to contribute to that patient-held record and be able to exchange the information back with their GP or clinician, whoever it is they need to share information with. So that's a digital platform. That's how it's going to work. It will be there'll be a firewall in between it and an integration engine in there in order to actually help us exchange the information, take the information from the patient digital platform and share it with what we have here is the 14 health boards, our core systems like HI, our national integration platform, and health and social care partnerships, of which there are 32 in our. So that would be the key in terms of how we're delivering patient portal. So that's about all I wanted to cover for today. My contact details are there, as well as the eHealth website if you want to go and have a look at some of the strategies and that I've talked about here today, or see what we're actually doing in that space. Okay, thank you.
I direct a programme called the Innovative Healthcare Delivery Programme, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here at the launch of the PROMs PREMs element of the Cancer Innovation Challenge. We in IHDP have worked along with the innovation centres, particularly Data Lab, to get this to where it is today. So it's really exciting to be moving from concept to delivery in terms of the PROMs PREMs. I've been asked to set this work in the wider concept of the work that we're doing to build a Scottish cancer intelligence framework. Now, I've got an admission to make. Like Joanne, I'm a civil servant, and I'm seconded out of Scottish Government to lead this work. Just to fill you in a wee bit on the background, how our IHDP came about. One of the things I do and did in my previous existence as Deputy Chief Medical Officer was chair of the Scottish Cancer Task Force. And over a number of years, I've been really struck by the mass of cancer data out there that is not being utilised to maximum effect to improve patient outcomes. So a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to really focus on this, being seconded out of government to lead this programme, and we're based down at the Far in the Bio-Quarter. So this is the overarching aim of the IHDP. We're aiming to harness the power of informatics to deliver value rapidly to patients, clinicians, the wider NHS, in collaboration with academia, industry, and the third sector. We've got a number of high-level aims. First of all, we don't want to be reinventing wheels. What we're doing in cancer, I'm going to tell you a bit about that, we want to apply the same approach to other clinical areas in due course, thereby demonstrating that we are a nationwide learning health system. We're very much acting as a translational hub, sitting at the centre of academia, industry, the NHS, and a lot of my time is spent in spotting things that need to be joined up and pointing people in the direction of others who are doing similar work, who might join with them. But our first priority is to develop this cancer intelligence framework for Scotland, linking primary, secondary, and ultimately social care data. And the reason that we want to do this is to improve patient outcomes. We're using cancer as a demonstrator work stream, as I said, which could be applied in other areas in due course. These are the aims, slightly lower level aims. We want all clinicians treating cancer patients to have access to their patients' data and other aggregated data looking at comparable patients in near real time. Similarly, we want all eligible cancer patients who want to access their own data to be able to do that, to help, as Joanne said, with supported self-management, and now to be able to contribute their own data directly through PROMs PREMs tools. We do a lot of cancer audit in Scotland, and a lot of it is still pretty clunky and manual. So we want to use this digital framework to move to a situation of continuous quality improvement rather than intermittent audit of cancer. For our management colleagues in the NHS, this will bring real benefits in terms of better performance management and help with service planning. I'll give you just one little example of how it could actually help in real life on the admin side, and that's in terms of cancer waits. When we started this work, we went around the cancer centres, met with a wide variety of individuals, from clinicians, senior management, e-health, cancer waiting times, audit staff, you name it, they were in the room. And we listened to what they had to say, and it's absolutely clear that in terms of tracking cancer waits, there's an enormous industry going on out there in the NHS. So if we could just make the cancer waiting time staff's lives a bit easier by getting this onto an electronic basis, that would be very helpful. We want to be able to benchmark outcomes in Scotland with the rest of the UK and more widely, and we see this framework as really enhancing research and innovation opportunities. So, with everything there are challenges. The culture actually taking the hearts and minds of the people that I've already mentioned is not a challenge, because every visit that we undertook, everyone in those rooms was saying, you need to do this, we really need this. They weren't saying you're wasting your time, forget about it. So I think culturally everybody's on the same page as us. The problem, as Joanne has already indicated, is that the data that we want to link sits in multiple heterogeneous places in NHS Scotland. And most systems, electronic systems, do not talk to each other. So we've got the problem of how we get those legacy systems linked. We've got a big work stream around data sharing, because information governance remains a problem in Scotland. And I'm not going to go into that work stream today. Suffice to say that we are helping Dr. Andrew Fraser, the Clinical Science Director at Health Scotland, who's leading on this work stream to try and come up with solutions that enable easier data sharing while protecting data privacy for patients. And we're tasked with applying cutting-edge techniques. So I think we're in a good place today discussing PROMs and PREMs, because the companies you're going to be chatting to during the day for sure are bringing cutting-edge techniques to this space. Over the past decade or so, NHS Scotland has made enormous investments in these areas: informatics, data analytics, digital health, genomics, and stratified medicines. So we're aiming to capitalise on what's already been developed in these areas. And we're doing it, as I said, in collaboration with these groups. You see patients, the public, and the third sector at the top there. We're very closely linked into government, as you would expect. We've got industry, pharma, we've got companies in the room today that we're working with. We're linked to the academic community, to the e-health community, and very importantly to clinicians in all of our endeavours. So this is what we're simply aiming to do, bringing all the available cancer data. Peter mentioned the QPI data. We've got systemic anti-cancer therapy data, radiotherapy data. We've got data in primary care in the SPAR system, which is just beginning to take off. And now we're going to have PROMs and PREMs data, so it's great. We want to join all of this together. Why do we want to do that? Because we want transparency at a national level to be able to identify unwarranted variation and shine a light on it and better understand why that is occurring. So that's the aim of the Cancer Intelligence Framework, to be able to identify variation. And this is a graphic reminder of why we need to do this. Our outcomes in Scotland from cancer are inferior to those in the rest of the UK and other comparable Northern European countries. So the top line there, the orange one, is Scotland. You can see a significant gap, even though that line is going down, indicating that more people are surviving cancer, but the gap remains between the two bottom lines, which are the rest of the UK and other European countries. And that gap shows no signs of narrowing. It's my very strong belief until we get a better handle on the data, it's going to be very difficult to narrow that gap and really improve outcomes. So I'm very excited that we're now going to be in a position to have PROMs and PREMs data added to the vision for the SCIF. I believe that if we get to this situation of fully joined up data for discussion and sharing, that we'll be able to shape and reshape government policy and clinical care and give an intro into research in a way that just isn't available at the moment. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm sure we're all going to enjoy the day.
We're talking about patient-clinician experience with apps and technology. From the groups, I just kind of summarized four points that kind of kept coming up and I thought were quite interesting. Was the notion of sustainability and integration. So integration in terms of software integration and how it works with all the other things. And this comes up a lot when you're talking about new digital innovations is, you know, doctors say we don't want another screen, we don't want another window. And I think that's an important thing because that also impacts usability, which then has an impact on sustainability and how long it can go on for. And as well, with sustainability, there's a lot of issues around ongoing support in terms of technical support. Someone mentioned that a lot of the times you get a brand new software package and a lot of the companies that you buy that off then sort of don't offer that ongoing support, which again can make usability and sustainability quite difficult. Another key point that came up was well, kind of related. So we don't want to have collect data for data's sake. So in developing new data stores, essentially, in databases, there needs to be, as well as kind of protocols around collecting of data, sharing of data, there also has to be a change in thinking around, okay, so what do we do with the data? We've got all this now. Why do we want it? And what can we then do with it? And part of this is, again, it kind of also links back to sustainability, and you need to give feedback to people. When you're collecting information, you're definitely going to get a better quality of information coming in if you can demonstrate, and if the person giving you that information knows why you're collecting it and knows what the impact and the importance of good quality information is going to be. And so I think that's a really important thing. What one person mentioned, the idea of, so we're asking people to give us information, and it's going to help. It's going to help us improve services, but we also need to make sure that immediately the person given that information is also going to find a benefit, and we're going to be giving them something to make their lives easier as well. And the final thing is about reshaping relationships. So again, with the role of with kind of increased data collection, how is that going to reshape that relationship between a person and their kind of medical team? And I think that's, and a lot of because one of the prompt questions I had was about training, and I think I mentioned this with most groups, is that importance of training, not necessarily about how to use the new software or the new information, but how that impacts practice, and how you can use that to enhance kind of personal relationships that you have with people. So yeah, that's my summary. I hope I've mentioned everything that people said, and if not, you can come and tell me off later.
Okay, so we were discussing the integration and compatibility with existing health. So I think 15 minutes was quite a short time to be trying to discuss that for each group. But the main themes that came about, so one of the key things is governance around this. So we need to be clear, get people together and talk about what data is expected to be going in, what data is expected to be coming out, and make sure we've got a map of that data. We need to make sure that there's a prioritisation of projects, so if that involves getting all stakeholders in together and work out where they are and what the priority is in terms of other projects that they've got going on. And one of the other key things that we discussed was contractual expectations. So all the different health boards, they've all got their own contracts for different suppliers, and I think we need to get some people together and talk about what we expect to come out of this. We need some flexibility, because going forward, we're looking at what we're doing now, but we need to think about how that's going to integrate with systems in the future, how these are going to change year on year, and 10 years down the line, we'll probably be using something completely different, but we need to have that flexibility factored in. We also need to think about resourcing. So that was one of the other key issues. So one of the big things is that somebody mentioned was engaging clinicians. They're obviously very busy people. Trying to get them upskilled and trained could be quite an issue. And we need to have realistic expectations around this as well. So again, looking to the future, understanding that the NHS is restricted in terms of resource and money. So we can't compare ourselves to large organisations that like Amazon and Google who are doing this on a daily basis and making lots of money. But we also need to bear in mind that patients probably do have an expectation that it's going to get to that level. So we need to keep that in mind too.
So we were discussing integration within existing clinical systems, and the first main question was around what initiation points would be most useful. So there was a sort of general chat that actually when someone is registered perhaps as a new patient to a service, so that might be when they're diagnosed, it could be in primary care, it could even be in emergency care as well. So if someone is presenting for the first time as a new patient, that might be an interesting point to get what we might call a baseline. However, we also recognise that a true baseline might actually be pre-condition, it could be pre-diagnosis, so there was lots of discussion there around that. Also considering it's not just about treatment but about care, so initiating sort of PROMs collection throughout a treatment process, amalgamating it with existing appointment systems. So obviously there are standardised follow-up procedures after diagnosis for different cancers or different diseases where patients are followed up at particular time points, integrating the collection of PROMs with those already amalgamated systems. But yeah, it wasn't just about through treatment, but also about care. And also those initiation points for collecting PROMs after treatment. So for some patients, they might quite like to be asked about their quality of life after they've finished a course of treatment, but also for some patients it might be important to them to put that aspect of their lives behind them. So there's very much a lot of conversation around things being patient-led, and that led on to our other conversations around how could and should patients be identified, and very much kind of leading from patients in terms of also who should have access to what information. I know certainly before I was in a health service research role, I as a patient naively thought that everyone saw everything, and I was quite okay with that. Obviously we know that's not the case. So there was definitely a theme of everyone saying it should very much be patient-led. However, there are limitations with that. That's a lot of responsibility on the patient to decide what is relevant for what healthcare professional to see. How do I as a patient make the decision that what my nurse should see should be the same or not as my GP, for example. We also discussed the interesting concept of the right to be forgotten, that some patients may not want all clinicians and all parts of the healthcare service to see their information, but they might want some information to disappear completely. And we have to honour that, right for patients to be forgotten as well. We also discussed everyone's experience of current PROMs in use, the different challenges and opportunities. It was very much agreed that through current projects and research projects as well, that PROMs obviously have an incredibly significant role in patient care, but also there is the sort of danger of patients who drop off the system, especially after their post-treatment. Patients also getting questionnaire fatigue. It's another form to fill out or another app to play with, or another website, but actually getting that clinician buy-in and getting clinicians to really sort of ask themselves, what is the question? Why am I doing this? So it's not a process-led thing, it's a purpose-led. So I am doing this for a particular reason. And then you get the patients to buy in that sense as well. So if a clinician understands why they're collecting that PROMs and of what value that information is to them, then that becomes more valuable to the patient, and that sort of trust between clinician and patient around, well, they're asking me something useful because it's going to help me and it's going to help my population as a patient group as well was really important. So a lot of themes around things being patient-led, but there are absolutely challenges around that and making sure that care is equitable but also person-centred.
So we discussed the routine use of PROMs, and I'll just give you a little bit about the SMC perspective to start. We really see PROMs as a way to strengthen the patient-based evidence that feeds into SMC assessments. SMC, the Scottish Medicine Consortium, we conduct health technology assessment and make recommendations on the availability of new medicines in Scotland. So PROMs are a way to strengthen the patient-based evidence that already feeds into that process and then inform the final decisions. And I think where, in looking to the future, where this is going to be very important is if we're in a situation where we accept a medicine initially conditional to further data collection, and then that further data comes in and PROMs are part of that. So in terms of the discussion that we had, we talked earlier about the two aims, where we've got the individual patient care, the collection of PROMs for individual patient care, and then the population data. And really those two aims have to join up. And the tailored questions that you might ask to improve individual patient care, there has to be some kind of regular standard measurement that's taken within that, and then that maybe gets extracted out to be used in the population analysis. Other points, and these have probably already been said, it needs to be easy, fast and simple, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere if you haven't got that initial data collected. We need to maintain levels of engagement, and quite interesting, I think was just mentioned, if we can manage to get a longer term time frame of the collection of data, how will we continue to maintain that engagement if we're wanting to continue to collect some basic information after treatment has finished for a little bit of time into the future. We talked a little bit about consent, and we felt it wasn't so much an issue because patients believed that their information they provided to their clinician would be available for other parts of the NHS and social care. And also some discussion around the need to address information governance, which perhaps needs to be a little bit more flexible and perhaps needs to change moving forward. And then I think just the last point was coming back to more the research side, is where do you actually find the baseline for this? We're looking at PROM data collected in this way. It's essentially single-arm information. We've got no comparator, no before or after analysis, so we've got to try and find a way to collect a baseline to compare that against. Okay?
Can I just say thank you again to Gregory, Vicky, Emma, and Jan, because it wasn't easy to facilitate such short discussions on very big topics. So round of applause to our facilitators. Thank you. Okay, and now we're moving on to a reflection session. Can I invite our panel to please come and take a seat? Brian will be our chair. Essentially, this is an opportunity for the companies and the audience to ask our panel questions on things that have been discussed this morning.
Obviously, there's a wide range of PROMs and a wide range of people's opinions of what should be collected. From us as a company to have access to some people who can help us identify those. And once we've identified them, we can make them electronic. But it's who's the authority that we come and see on this one?
Peter, do you want to answer that? So I guess there's
So in terms of the sort of the information that we need for national type cohort type analysis, I guess there's a program of work called CMOP that Marion Benny and colleagues are running, which will hopefully give us information on which which types of PROMs are useful in which contexts for national analysis. The individual patient care side of things, I think that's much less certain, and I absolutely agree you'll need to engage with the direct care teams. And I think it's the job of us, and the Cancer Challenge team, perhaps working with IHDP and other stakeholders to try and broker those introductions.
Hi, Dave from Open Brawley. I think we're all welcome the standardisation of approach in terms of a portal, in terms of the e-health system. The one doing it once for Scotland, I think, is a dream come true for us, having had to deal with lots of different boards. It's just how we deal with innovation in that context. If we have a standard patient portal, does that limit? We've got 5 companies in the room with 5 different solutions. We're looking at new ways of working. We can use things like Google Home and Fitbits and so on. Is there a risk that a solution that's perhaps provided by, and I don't know what the plan is, by a single vendor limits us to, just one vision of what PROM collection could be?
I think to answer that question, I think what's key is the patient portal, in terms of the patient platform, is the vehicle for you to be able to share information with health via the patient-held file. There will be work to be done, to actually engage with developers, app developers, and things like that, to actually standardise on what are the key APIs that you need to integrate with, so that your app can share information, and that you can pull the relevant data from the person-held file into your app. But I think what's key just now is that there will be some open API development as part of the patient platform. However, we need to work with suppliers if that needs to be extended in any way. But I think what we're looking for is to what extent a lot of that can be reused and utilised for the whole of Scotland, as opposed to just for one specific clinical need and maybe just for one board. We're looking to make sure it can be used throughout. So I hope that answers your question.
Discussed this, that your strategy is probably a 3 or 5 year strategy, but this project is 1 year, has to deliver results. So to get a additional platform in place, it might not be in place in time for this.
That is true. We are actually in the process of developing a proof of concept for the patient portal. So the diagram, the last of my presentation there, that is what's currently being built right now, to actually prove the concept of it. But we are looking to start a patient portal programme early next year to be delivered in live. But yes, our timescales are between now and 2020 for delivering these services online.
Is it likely for this programme to be a use case for
I think in terms of the proof of concept that Glasgow are running just now, the services have already been defined, but I'd welcome the opportunity to talk with you further to see what we can do in that space.
I'd be interested to know, I mean, we're talking about a pan-Scotland solution here, and to what extent it would be reasonable to look at one particular health board and trying this out in one particular health board rather than attempting a pan-Scotland solution at this stage. I just know what people would think about that.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that's very much the way and the line that we were taking and thinking. So in general terms, in terms of resources, and we obviously, since hearing that we were selected already, we started to work quite hard, and we've run a little bit into the problem of resources generally available on the NHS Scotland side, the e-health. the e-health boards, and I just wondered, do you feel there is enough resource allocation to actually support us during the 9-month period, or at least the first 3 months? And it's really looking at that level, and are there particular people we should approach? We have already done that, but particularly if we also want to perhaps at some stage expand to other health boards.
I'm going to wish you'd never volunteered.
I don't think I volunteered. Yeah, that's it's a very challenging question. Thanks. No, I think within this programme of work, Julie Faulkner's the main liaison between IHDP work and the e-health community. And we're so far, she's making big strides to try and raise a profile and to get that engagement with the health boards. And we're fortunate enough to see some of them here today. I don't know whether anybody, John or Paul, might want to jump in with me in terms of the e-health community. But yes, where
Come
we
on,
where
John
we
and
can,
Paul, be decent.
where we try, there are these pressures that the e-health community do have at the moment to deliver against very challenging timescales and very limited budgets, but where we can, and it's all within all of our strategies to help that innovation space as well, and help to develop that. So I think that's something that Julie certainly would be able to help facilitate as part of your 9-month period.
I think I would just like to add that you need to be reassured that the visibility of this project is very high up the food chain in Scotland. The IHDP's Joint Strategy Board is chaired by Paul Gray, and as Joanne has just said, the e-health link with all of this is Julie, who operates at Scottish Government level. So although we can't answer your question and say here's the stash of cash you seek, we can say that the visibility in Scotland is involving the right people. And it's really over to you now to use this innovative environment, which is very different, a different approach for us, to actually exploit this innovative environment and show the Scottish Government what can be achieved. And I think we have a unique opportunity with this different approach that's been taken for this.
Perhaps follows on from that. Tim Williams from My Clinical Outcomes. Just wondering to what extent there's clarity about how phase 1 leads into phase 2 and how phase 2 might lead into a wider rollout. I presume there's likely to be a winner at the end of the phase 2 project. Is the expectation that winner will then get rolled out, or will there then need to be a procurement exercise? Is there any kind of thoughts about how that will work at that stage?
Well, the 5 phase 1 projects have 3 months to produce their report, which will then be submitted to the Strategic Management Board. And sitting on that Strategic Management Board are representatives from all the key groupings, key silos that would make decisions. They will then choose 1 or 2 to take forward into phase 2. And at the end of phase 2, the outputs will be published. There is no absolute commitment to what happens beyond phase 2. It would be wrong of me to actually put that out there. But as I say, the visibility, the e-health community at government level and Paul Gray, they are looking at what you're doing. And there is a space there with the strategy, with the development of patient portal. There is going to be a solution. And therefore, this exercise, we can say, looking at who's looking at the output of it, will be a big influencer, if not a major player, in the solution that informs that patient portal.
Can I just add a wee bit to that? At the end of phase 2, the projects that reach the end of phase 2, we will be inviting an entire range of people that can take you to the next, hopefully be able to take you to the next stage, including interested health boards in England. We've already had contact from some health boards in England that have said, can you let us know what the outputs are from this, because we're looking for a system. So we'll, like Hilary said, we can't guarantee, that there'll be a rollout at the end of phase 2, but we will try our very best as part of this project to support, your next steps.
an expectation that the winning company will.
Will we get on page to actually roll out the solution and not just
Well,
how we should be rolled out?
I don't think you can put words in our mouth. We have to be transparent at this point. I mean, there is, as I say, I go back to looking at the people in the Scottish Health Service who are looking at the output of this exercise. They are the big names. They are the ones who dictate and fund policy. So it doesn't get higher, it doesn't get bigger than that in the Scottish Government. So you're getting as a good critical eye on your work, and therefore it's as favourable as anything to be then taken on. But we also do, in terms of looking at your performance in phase 1, we keep a stock of how many times you ask us that, and then we will treat you detrimentally if you ask us again. It's part of the evaluation.
But
Oh, I don't know.
But to be fair, I mean, if you've got an organisation that has created and developed something, they're bound to be at an advantage, I would have thought, over people who haven't. I would have thought. Although you can't say that.
Can't
bound
say
to be.
that.
If any of you were making that assessment, you would be thinking, they've actually made this work. And that is always a plus whenever anyone is considering any new thing. Certainly in the health service, because we've had plenty of promises on paper. It never amounts to anything quite as much as actually having something that's in front of you and working. That is always much more impressive.
And also to reiterate, the call was constructed in such a way that you have to have a health board partner, and there has to be evidence of business development here. So, you know, a lot of that ground is covered in you getting to the first hurdle, in terms of you've passed that hurdle to show that you've got that link, or you will have that link, and that there is a business, you know, that there's evidence of an ability to develop and market this in a much bigger scale.
Got a question in the front?
Sorry, just to add to that before, and also the way this funding competition has been structured is to get companies to a point where they can say, look, it works. You know, we have this, we've done all the groundwork, and get you in a more ready-to-market state than someone else starting from scratch and not having gone through this process.
Thank you. I'm Elspeth, one of the patient representatives here today, and really just reiterating some of the issues we discussed in our group, but issues which are very close to my heart, and they're all about inclusion, starting with the barriers to engagement, to ensure that these barriers the patients are supported in accessing the system. And once they're able to access, obviously a whole range of barriers I'll not go into, but it may be English as a second language, maybe mental health issues, it may be folks who require some sort of support to access. Once patients are engaged, accessibility is a huge issue, so ensure that the experience is meaningful for patients. And once they are involved, how to maintain that engagement, how to promote that continuing engagement, that's an issue, so that there is not significant drop-off at an early or even mid-stage in the process. So how to encourage that long-term engagement. So these were just 3 issues I wanted to raise.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Jeff Wilcock, Open Brolly again. My question that I buttonholed Peter up before is more of a technical question, in that it's signposted where we should look to get the PROMs that should be collected from. It's when they're collected, some sort of signposting for particularly for the small SMEs about where would be a good place initially to deliver them to, as well as operational. So, because it's for most of us, we haven't spent a lot of time in health, or in this particular part of health.
I mean, I think that's probably where the relationship and the working with individual health boards and clinicians.
But they will be very much operationally focused.
They will, but actually they're going to be the ones who are going to have to make this happen. So, I mean, to my mind, they're the people who you need to communicate with in order to find ways of delivering this system.
The way I read this, it's a clear split between the research side and the operational side. At the moment, it's easier probably to visualize delivering signposting to where's a good place to start would be really helpful.
But your relationship will be established with the health boards, and they're a good starting point for that aspect too.
I think so.
See if I can help. So most of the information that flows towards the national data set originates in the health boards. So the individuals who, or data controllers who collect that data at health board level will probably be the go-to people in the first instance.
Steve Pavis, National Services Scotland. There are a series of 5 safe havens around Scotland. There's a national one and there's 4 regional ones. They all hold data for research purposes. So that might be somewhere that you might want to look. The other organisation might be National Services Scotland. They hold national data sets across Scotland. If I can help with that at all, then I can give you contact names, who you might want to contact.
Can I just clarify though? Are you interested in what happens, this sort of day-to-day data that patients might be collecting? Is that what you're interested in?
I think it's easier for the SMEs to see the purpose for the day-to-day collecting on the care side of things. And I may be wrong, but my experience is that that's what clinicians tend to focus on operationally.
Right.
And reading it beyond that to
Is the difficulty. Right. Okay.
perhaps not uppermost in their mind. And I'm just saying some signposting would be very helpful to make sure that we can do that more easily than the pendulum swinging more towards the operational side.
Yes.
Can I just make some comment here? And there's other people better placed than me to do this. So I absolutely understand your problem. You're collecting data. You will work with the local boards in feeding that back for individual patient care. But there's an element, and thinking about one of the workshops that I think was led by Jan around how do we actually then collate that? If that becomes some standardised key data, how can we pull that once for Scotland? And that probably does need a little bit of thinking through within the context of IHDP, because we're working to bring the prescribing chemotherapy data more collegiately across Scotland, and I think the PROMs data falls into that additional kind of set of evolving data.
Yeah, we've got the script. Can I just add to that? We're working very closely with NSS at the moment in developing the Scottish Cancer Registry and turning it into Scottish Cancer Registry and Intelligence Service. So I can envisage some way down the road the data, if this project is successful or whoever wins it is successful, there being a PROMs data set that we would be interested in NSS incorporating into the Cancer Registry. So there are various mechanisms already up and running where we can make those connections.
Are there any other questions? Well, in that case, we can have lunch. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And so I'd like to invite Dokubo to come up and present their project.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I did anyway, and I'll still finish my pudding, but I'll finish that off a bit later on. So I'm Adrian Flowerday, I head up Dokubo. We started about 17 years ago, mainly involved in remote monitoring of patients, so out of hospital care is our area we've been involved with. On the cancer front, we've been working with Strathclyde University, a range of universities before that started in Dundee, but we're working on a large project looking at symptom management of patients on chemo across multiple EU countries, which is an interesting one. So really going to talk about what we've been doing and what we plan to do over the next couple of months, hopefully. Doc at Home is our kind of remote monitoring platform, and I thought I'd introduce that first of all. And what it consists of is a clinical database that clinicians log into. We can then individualise a care plan, so we can have any combination of questions, PROMs, PREMs. They can be changed at any time. Free text, two-way messaging, and any empowerment education, that type of stuff. That then goes down to a range of different, what we call interaction devices. So to meet the needs of a wider population and different accessibility issues and IT abilities mainly, we've developed over years a range of different solutions to interface with people. And it goes from a very fit-for-purpose device we developed with Age UK, which it's an Android device, it's a Class 2 medical device, but it's got buttons. And because a lot of elderly people we deal with, particularly with COPD, symptomatic, shake and everything, can't use touch screens. So we've got buttons on it, it's big, chunky, sits on a cradle, it's always charged, so you don't have to worry about plugging a little USB lead in and things like that. But it's an Android device, it's locked down. But because we've got Android, we can then put that up on Android tablets and phones and everything for those people who are happy to use that. And then we also go to, if people are happy to just get an email and use a web browser, usually if they get email, they're happy with web browsers, we could just send them an email and they have a link on the email and they click on that and they takes them to their own patient portal that they can then answer their questions. Those questions can be daily, twice daily, monthly, yearly. Doesn't matter, you can set up different questions at different times. But all this is about meeting the patient's ability to use technology and also the cost, because obviously this is very cheap to implement, this is a bit more expensive. And then we're doing interfaces to things like EMIS and Dastra and clinical solutions, a whole load of different kind of technologies out there, InterSystems as part of some work we're doing in Liverpool. So that's kind of our doc at home thing. On top of that, we built the chemotherapy symptom management project, and that was based on a whole load of daily PROMs we've asked people that look for a whole load of conditions while you're on cancer, on chemotherapy, and flags up and alerts whether someone's going off for any reason, up to the oncology teams and the like. And we've also been bringing in things like Fitbit data, sleep data, activity data, which is, I see, an unregulated world into the clinical IT domain, so that nurses, if they really want to give someone a Fitbit and you can afford it and you've got enough money to do that, or if you use the patient's own, you can look at that data at the same time. So they're the things we've been doing up to now. And then in Lanarkshire, we've been using our Docobo Web, which is our kind of browser email type solution for people on a TCAP program in Lanarkshire. So every 28 days, this is post-treatment, they get an email, they click on the email link, and that takes them to this web page where they can answer their questions. They can look at self-help library, they can look at their recent data, they can send messages backwards and forwards to the clinical teams, all encrypted and secure. And that's the system they've been using in Lanarkshire so far. From the clinician point of view, they have their login via the web, and they can see the list of patients, they can see any alert conditions, any messages, etc. And then if they drill down to a particular patient, they can see initially the last 28 days of readings. That could be calendar days, it could be the last 28 readings if you only measure them once a month. Yeah? So you can decide what it is in there. And for our normal long-term condition patients, you're looking at vital signs, blood pressure, body weight, and a load of symptomatic stuff like anxiety, edema, breathlessness, and the like. So that's kind of, Tricia, what we've done, and with the symptomatic data we're doing for chemotherapy is just builds and very similar to that. Now, this could quite easily be a page within Care Track, or it's called, InterSystems. We have it in EMIS, so you can have EMIS here as a patient, you get a little tab here, click on telehealth, and it opens up this bit, but within EMIS. So you can just sign on to EMIS, and you can view all this data on EMIS, and that's quite an important thing. And that's what I talk about, don't always move data, move information when people need it. So that's what we've been doing there, so they can see that. So the current PROM solution we have, like I say, Lanarkshire using it. It's a thing called a Spark questionnaire. I guess some of you will be aware of that. It's looking at a whole load of different outcome measures, not just clinical, but a whole load of things around quality of life, issues that are bothering them, that type of thing. And then the TCAP team pick up from those responses. And this is where it's important, because the technology doesn't do the care. The technology is just an enabler. It's the nursing team, the care teams, who then respond to that data and deliver the appropriate care on top of that. Patient gets email, they complete their PROM on their browser, and they have access to self-help material. Success today, this is new off the press. It was probably not on the press yet, They've had some 74 patients gone through the system, got some statistically significant reduction in symptom burdens, and you can read what's there, psychological distress, care needs, and improvement in quality of life. Rated excellent, 90% of the patients, and they've managed to find some more money to fund it, so that's even better. But that's a fairly self-contained system. It's just the Spark EPROM once every 28 days. Yeah. So what we want to do in this project is actually, through those engagement sessions, of which some of today has helped on that and given me some ideas, is around, we want to do wider set of PROMs. So you can select which PROM you want to use, when you want to use it, and how often you want to use it. And you can change that at any time through the patient pathway. We want to look at identifying new features that we can add on. So one thing we're interested in is trying to reduce the time to diagnosis as well by collecting data at the point of referral from the GP, so the oncologist can send people straight to treatment rather than having to see him, which will save a lot of time because oncologists don't have a lot of time to do that. So we're looking at looking along that pathway: diagnostic, collect data; treatment, collect data, manage people fairly intensely; post-treatment, have stuff after that. Identify motivation requirements, because compliance, is always equal to whether people are getting feedback and if they find the thing useful. So kind of learning from there. Multiple cancer types, disease types, self-help specific information is important. The ability to drag and drop specific self-help. Streaming videos, what we want to do is provide the clinical teams with the ability to say, all right, Nancy, I think you'd find this video helpful. Click it across, drop it, and then in their device in the home, whether it's a web-based or a device, they'll get a message that says, here's a link to a video, click on the link, and they can watch the video as a streaming video. So that type of thing we want to add on as part of this activity. And another thing that came up today, interestingly, which is the kind of point I've added, is the need sometimes to get the information you were told in your meeting with the clinician back to you. I think you mentioned that, didn't you, Julie? You go to a meeting, I do a time about my mum, and I've forgotten half the stuff when I come home. My brothers say, what did they say? What about this? I've forgotten, Sounded all really good, and I'd remember it when I was there, but I've forgotten it. So actually, a bit of that feedback. When you do financial advice, after he's been, he sends you a letter. So we discussed this, and we discussed this, and we discussed this. Why can't we do the same? Every other industry does it. So that's some of the stuff we'd like to look at. Obviously, system-level data collection we talked about. Where do we send that data? Where do we put it? We do a lot of population health analytics as part of our other side of what we do, and that is bringing together some of that data at a population level, looking at prevalence, looking at gaps in care, and the like. And then finally, interoperability with Scottish IT systems and all the issues involved in that. Trying to understand what's vision and what's actually in place, because they're quite sometimes two different things, and all we can deliver is to what's in place in a sense, but make sure we're compatible with what's in the future. Define some of that FHIR-enabled business-to-business links, allow us to connect, like to EMIS and the like. Access to the CI and the patient demographic services or the equivalent to be able to enrol patients on the system and that. And actually, now we learn a bit about the My Account portal, patient portal. Well, there's no reason why the Docabo web thing can't appear within that My Account portal. Yeah, it's just web services stuff. It's really easy stuff to do, as long as you get everyone in agreement with it. So I think that's pretty much it. So I think from our point of view, the new stuff we'll be doing is looking at the new library of PROMs, PREMs, understanding what people need, library self-help management, different PROMs and PREMs delivered, and where do we put that data at the end of it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you.
So hi, I'm Sally Dams. I'm the project manager from My Clinical Outcomes for the Cancer Innovation Challenge project. I'm finding quite a mouthful. So I joined My Clinical Outcomes just under a year ago. By way of background, I was at TSB where I headed up their digital engagement and mobile function, so TSB the bank. And I also then worked at Accenture for a number of years in project management and delivery, and actually started my life as a qualified veterinary surgeon, so I had quite a varied career to date. So I'm going to hand over to Tim, who's going to explain a bit more about My Clinical Outcomes, because I think similar to other people in the room, we're proposing something that's based on our existing technology, but making it bespoke to the needs of NHS Scotland.
Thanks, Al. Would you mind clicking forward? So hi everyone, my name is Tim Williams. I'm co-founder and CEO of MCO. My job is to talk you through a little bit about our business, our approach, our technology, and I'll hand back to Sally to go into the project in a bit more detail. So I started the company actually at the back end of 2010. I've been working in the NHS as a doctor for 4 years and also spent 2 or 3 years as a management consultant, mainly working in the NHS. And I'd really seen the uptick in adoption of digital tools in our day-to-day lives during that period, and the paucity of digital technology available to patients and clinicians to help them live better, more informed lives, and for doctors to make more informed decisions. So we set about building MCO as a consumer web app, software as a service application, to basically bridge that divide. And 7, 8 years on, and that's still all we do. It's our sole focus is to provide best-in-class digital technology for the collection and reporting and analytics of patient-reported outcome measures in routine clinical practice. It's worth saying also that we're condition and score agnostic, so we see ourselves really as the framework for making this happen, the how rather than the why or the what. So in doing so, we've invested quite heavily in making the technology really quite configurable in how it's deployed. So we're now a team, still a small team, we're 12 technologists, implementation specialists and analysts. We're also backed by a really helpful investor and advisory board. And along our journey, just sticking to this one approach, we've learned quite a lot. We've been accredited by some useful organisations. Notably amongst them is ICHOM, which is the International Consortium of Health Outcomes Measurement. I was lucky enough in 2014 to go and do the value-based healthcare course at Harvard under Professor Michael Porter, so the godfather of value-based healthcare. And ICHOM was coming into being at that time, so I got to know them. And ICHOM really see themselves as the what of outcomes measurement. They're setting a global standard for what should be measured across, I think, 32 conditions by the end of next year. They're aiming to cover more than 50% of the global disease burden. And there's several oncology specialties within that. So lung cancer is covered, breast cancer is covered, colorectal cancer is covered, and a couple of others as well. So where value-based healthcare is perhaps the why of outcomes measurement, growing and ageing populations, greater expectations as to what healthcare can deliver, unwarranted variation being rife, and spiralling costs. ICHOM are positioning themselves as the what of outcomes measurement. And clearly they're just a stake in the ground, and the measures that they put forward are useful from a global benchmarking perspective, but won't necessarily cover everything that's necessary to make useful clinical decisions. So our technology is really to drop in, yes, maybe their outcome sets, but then also wrap in local sets around that. Another accreditation we've had is with FIN in the English private sector. So there was a 2-year review of the private sector in the UK that finished about 2 years ago, 18 months, 2 years ago now. And surprise, surprise, the conclusion was there was a lack of transparency on cost and quality in private healthcare, which nobody was surprised by. And FIN was set up by the government regulator to solve that problem. And one of the 4 main work streams that they are mandating is around outcomes measurement. So from January 2018, outcomes need to be measured and published at a clinician and a condition level across 11 conditions. And that's led us to a raft of opportunities. Our 3 competitors are either pen and paper or disease silo, just to orthopaedics. So we're the only condition score agnostic digital solution. And that's led us to a few opportunities, most notably with Spire Healthcare. So Spire are a 38 hospital site we've been working with for just over a year now. We're now implemented across all their sites, collecting outcomes in 4 conditions initially. We've so far collected data on 8,000 patients, just over 1,000 clinicians. Starting to see some really useful results in terms of variation, both in terms of how clinicians make decisions and what the results of those decisions are. Clearly our clients are private sector clients, not this information that we give them about variation, and the fact that not all care is great care isn't always good news for them, but we at least allow them the opportunity to redress that balance before the data is published. If you click forward, Sal. So in terms of the technology, as I say, it's condition score agnostic, it's configurable, it exists, it works. Our approach is to focus on 3 main areas. One is the patient side, obviously, this is key. We've heard a lot this morning about using these systems has to be fast, has to be easy, has to be tailored to the needs of the patient. Of course it does, or it just won't work. So our patient side is slick and easy. It's very straightforward. It grabs enough data from the patient to allow us to serve the right questions at the right points in time. And then importantly also capturing additional questions throughout the care pathway that might affect the questions that we're asking or the frequency with which we're asking them. But beyond that, there's no complexity in terms of the data we're collecting from patients. Complexity is really on the clinician side, so which clinicians need access to what levels of data. This is a topic that's come up a few times this morning. And how are they going to be using that data? Ideal is that they're going to be using it to inform the care of individual patients. That then leads to a virtuous cycle in terms of patients knowing their clinicians are going to be using this data, being more willing and able to respond, driving up uptake rates, and actually lowering the cost or the complexity of acquiring this data, making completion rates high. But then also building configurable dashboards in our management view that allow service managers, divisional managers, commissioners access to the data that they need, again appropriately anonymised or pseudonymised, to allow them to make service level decisions and hopefully make care pathways higher quality and more efficient. I'll stress again, we're new to oncology. We started in orthopaedics, we've become condition score agnostic, we've been working with ICHOM. Our excitement about oncology was actually driven by some of the research we heard from Peter this morning, Ethan Bash's work that was presented at ASCO. I've never seen a paper so categorically positive about the benefits of doing this as the paper that says a median 5 months of life expectancy. And I was struck by the FDA-approved drugs that came out last year and the costs of those drugs and how little improvement in life expectancy they have relative to the implementation of this kind of program. So that allowed us to turn to, encouraged us to turn to oncology, and we've started talking to Cancer Research UK and Macmillan and Christie and the Marsden in the UK, and it's fantastic timing for us that this project has come up, so we're delighted to be here about to start phase 1. So tell us a bit more about what we're going to do with the project.
Okay. So I think Tim's touched on this. We've got the project objectives on the slide, but really I think we're really excited to work with all the different stakeholders in this room. It's quite a unique opportunity for us. I think there are loads of ambitious benefits that we've already talked through around cohort analysis and individual patient care. And we'll go through some example use cases to try and bring it to life. Obviously, the other benefits around taking out costly and ineffective care, so concentrating resource on the most value-adding activities. And again, it's come out time and time again. We want what we design to be really engaging for patients. We want it to become an integral part of their care. So they see the benefits of it and they want to complete the assessments and understand why they're being asked to. And we also recognise the need to be able to submit data to various different registries and research bodies. So they're kind of the overarching ambitions. In terms of practically within the project, we've got these 3 buckets of deliverables. So I mentioned earlier, we're looking to use our existing technology as the foundation for what we deliver. But when we go through the project plan, there's a lot of emphasis in the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks around requirements gathering and stakeholder engagement. Because we recognise that we need to understand the local requirements of NHS Scotland, we need to understand the e-health service requirements, and we need to understand the patient requirements. So everyone involved, we hope to engage with early in the project so that we're making something that's bespoke and actually can be integrated into clinical and care pathways. With that in mind, we've got the patient interfaces. So Tim showed you on a previous slide, we have a browser-based solution. So we'll look at those requirements and look to identify any enhancements and design those in phase 1 of the project. We're also looking to develop a new mobile app. So see, we had some good heated debates about whether that's the appropriate forum, not for everyone. But for some patient cohorts, it helps in terms of it's easier, it's faster, the native design of mobile apps, and also the ability to use push notifications when assessments are due. Similar story on the clinician admin interfaces, so we'll be looking to speak to clinicians within NHS Scotland, working with a health board closely to understand their requirements and care pathways and making enhancements to our existing solution accordingly. And then again, I think we've talked about this quite extensively, the interoperability. So our assumptions are that we will use open APIs, we'll align to the FAR specifications. But again, we'll hope to speak to e-health individuals at health boards and then more broadly to shape those requirements, to understand which systems we want to integrate with and what the push-pull model should be, both in terms of with the patient portals, but the clinical systems as well. So I'll whiz through these. We thought it might be helpful to bring it to life with a sort of use case. So Tim mentioned ICHOM earlier. They are quite helpful in terms of giving an indication of what measures to use. We aren't designing for a particular measure, we're measure agnostic, but it helps bring it to life. So they have published sets for 5 different cancer types, one of which is lung cancer. So an example use case could be that a patient sort of after diagnosis might be asked to log in and complete their first assessment, accessing it via the My Account or another patient portal. Again, a lot of debate about when that should begin, but as an example, that could give a baseline reading. If we look at the ITOM example, we would serve generic cancer quality of life measures as well as lung cancer specific questions. That could be done on tablet in the clinic, or they could be asked to complete it at home. Again, I think earlier the process around explaining the benefits is really crucial at this stage. Thereafter, the system's automated. It's all in the back end around the assessment scheduling. So again, if we illustrate it with the ITOM example, they'll receive a reminder 3, 6 and 12 months following the treatment initiation and annually thereafter. So really important to collect that long-term data in many cases. And we'll also use that same schedule to serve PREMs questionnaires as appropriate. And we talked again about serving it back to patients. So we have a patient dashboard so they can engage, they can see their historic results, and it can be a facilitation discussion point when they meet clinicians and they can talk about how they're doing and how they're finding the assessments. And they can take additional assessments at any time should they wish to beyond the automated schedule. We then hope that the data would become available in real time within the electronic patient record, so the key metrics that we define in that push-pull model. And within the MCO interface, we have notifications, so significant changes or deteriorations in scores that might prompt action from the clinician, which is the final stage on this slide. So obviously the hope is all this data results in action from the clinician. So whether that's tailoring a treatment or early indication of side effects of chemotherapy, we hope that it will facilitate that shared decision making and action from the clinicians, or at least enable the data for them to do so. I'll skip over this slide. That was the research that's been mentioned a few times. It got us excited about this. And then the cohort analysis. It's the same process from a patient perspective, but then we have the functionality to provide cohort analysis within My Clinical Outcomes, so comparing groups of patients, hospitals, and we've got an advanced analytics tool where we do statistical analysis and reporting, so start looking at identifying outliers, comparing different treatment pathways, for example. And we also submit data to registries, national research bodies and internationally. So ITOM, we're going to start introducing benchmarking, so that's stuff that we can look at integrating into as required. This is just an example of some of the reports that are generated from our analytics tool looking at variation. I won't dwell on them, but happy to answer any questions. And then finishing up, we've sort of talked about what we plan to deliver and why we plan to deliver it, in terms of how we hope to get there. As I said, there's a lot of emphasis up front around requirements gathering, so using the Alliance and their user panel, speaking to clinicians within a health board, working really closely with them, working with e-health professionals to capture those upfront requirements and make sure what we're designing is bespoke and fit for purpose in the NHS Scotland context. The outputs will be a requirements catalogue, use cases, process mapping from which the rest of the design will flow. We've then, I think, covered most of this in the browser solution. We'll look at what we have versus what the requirements are, do a fit gap analysis and a bit of a prioritisation exercise to work out what the solution should look like for phase 1. The mobile app, so we plan to design and create a new app. It's not something that we have currently. So the plan is to have designs for iOS and Android with a clickable demo that will go into a professional usability lab where they take individual patients who are undergoing cancer treatment and have hour-long qualitative sessions with them around usability and how they understand the questions and the dashboard and it's useful in their care. And then we'll look to iterate the designs based on the feedback we get there. Again, the interoperability, looking to have those conversations early on and then work to define what the interoperability should look like, both from a clinical system and patient system. And then at the bottom, we've obviously got the ongoing project management. So I think it's probably whittled through what we're trying to achieve and how we hope to do it. I think just remains to say that we are genuinely really excited about this opportunity and working with all the various stakeholders today. So thank you.
We've been talking a lot about technology, and we've been talking a lot about what patients experience. And I really want to bring it back to what patients experience when they get the diagnosis of cancer. And a lot of you are working in cancer, so you all know about that from a lot of us from a professional point of view. But think about potentially friends or family members who you've met while they were diagnosed with cancer. And perhaps you can remember the anxiety and the confusion that arose, and all the questions they had about what's going to happen to my family, what's going to happen to me, what's the type of treatment I'm going to get, what are side effects, how am I going to essentially manage, how I'm going to cope with this. And it's really on the basis of that that we said we need to do something about this. There is a lot of technology out there. There is a lot of knowledge. And how can we actually bring the knowledge of the experience of other people, how we can bring that and share that and bring that in the hands to thousands and potentially even millions of people who are dealing with cancer, that being people directly affected or the carers. So I'm Anne Brumvels. I'm a pharmacist by training. I'm a biomedical scientist. And I previously set up a data mining biotechnology company in London that essentially I brought from my sitting room to the London Stock Exchange. It was a great story, wonderful. Took a sabbatical of 2 years. But then I really found out that I wanted to deal with things that were more important to me. My previous company was focused on personalized medicine. And I thought, where do we have a lot of issues when we're dealing with personalized medicine? And that is... and it skips to something else. I can do those without the slides, but they're just so pretty. Anyway, so personalized medicine is so difficult for people to grasp when you don't have any experience with medicine or with life sciences as such. So it's actually my brother and I who were discussing at the garden at home at some stage. And my brother is a clinical occupational physician helping cancer patients rehabilitate. And we're also joined by Alice, who's actually doing is part of the NHS leadership course and is focused on health informatics. So a fantastic person to be joined by today. But we were really, particularly with my brother and I, we were saying, how can we actually help cancer patients now with all the health informatic tools that are there right now, particularly with a focus on personalized medicine. How can we inform them better? How can we guide them on the way? And that's what we're doing, and that's why we set up about 5 years ago, PX Healthcare. PX stands for patient experience, because having spoken to patients when we started out, being involved in not just the fora, but talking to them, we found out there's an enormous need there is to be filled, and helping them better, improving their experience from the moment of diagnosis till when they've been able to pick up their lives again following recovery. So we then said, okay, with PX we're going to develop OWISE. O stands for Onco. WISE is to make people wiser. And let's actually aim with this, not just to keep people, to guide them on the way with a suite of tools that helps them during the treatment and recovery, but also being data mining people. We'd love to collect patient-reported outcome data to help the patients improve their actual clinical outcomes directly, but also on a cohort basis, improve clinical outcomes altogether in oncology where we can. So this is what we've built, and we started with this in 2012 to build this, particularly focusing on cancer. We built tools that improve the patient experience. So the actual tool that we've developed has already shown to improve the patient-doctor dialogue, patient-physician dialogue. It's a tool, it's an app based, anyone can download it now from the iOS website, app stores or the Play stores from Google. And it's an app that supports patients on the way. It really improves essentially their experience, and in a fully anonymized way. And that's to say, we've actually covered and solved a part of the information governance issue already by not having any personal identifiable data at all in the platform and in the database and in the collection of data that we have at all, because patients don't enter any personal identifiable details. We just don't want to have it. We're allergic to it, we say. But having the cohort, the aggregated data, fully anonymized, no data of people associated with it, we can actually start the investigations. And we apply advanced data analytics to that to actually see not just what are the classical statistical analyses revealing, but how we can start to apply even machine learning to it to improve the predictive analytics side of this, to really start to understand why people get particular side effects at which moments in time. That's over over the course of the next couple of years that we're going to focus more on that, but all with the aim to improving outcomes in cancer. So essentially we love data, we do that, but we always put the patients at the heart of everything we do from day one. So as mentioned, OWISE, you can download it right now. It was initially developed for breast cancer, as we felt that was a group of patients who were really responsive to what we were doing. And it's, as I mentioned, a suite of tools. So there's, for example, a very popular feature in the app that we didn't know. We put into it in a very, I think, a relatively high quality way. There's a secured audio recording function because patients love it. They can't recall what was said during consultations. So this way, it's secured in that actually it's a recording that can't be shared on a website. It can't be emailed. It can't be tampered with. You can listen back to it or you can delete it. It's stored on your device. And that way, patients can actually, we had one patient, she actually is relatively young, 32 years old. She used to bring her parents to the consultation with the surgeons and the oncologist. And at some stage, her parents were going to be away on holiday to Greece. And then the parents said, shall we cancel the holiday because you have your important consultation with the oncologist? And he said, no, don't worry about it. I have OWISE. I can go. When you come back, we can listen back to it together. But I feel much more empowered, she said, using that. Another feature that this particular user used a lot as well were actually the tracking and tracing tools, which is our way of dealing with patient-reported outcome data. There's a suite of sliders there. There's a set of sliders there that people can use to record at any moment in time how they feel during the day. Pain, nausea, even the color of their urine, and the consistency of their stool can also be recorded to see if there are particular problems that patients experience from chemotherapy side effects. But at the same time, there's also, you know, a range of other tools. We have about 25 now. We'll up this to about 80 in the next version. Sets of trackers that people can use. So it's also based as a website. People can, you know, I just spoke to someone who said, I should rather use it on my iPad or on my PC. We said, great, you can actually use it as a web app as well. So that way, people can actually use it at any time when they want it. And again, there's another feature I just want to bring to your attention because this is one of the things that came up today. Is we have, for example, algorithms running behind it that give people personalized medical information based on the type of, in this case it's breast cancer, but type of cancer that they have. So that means if you're premenopausal, you get totally different treatment, and potentially even when you're still fertile than, for example, when you're postmenopausal and you have a different type of breast cancer. So we have made sure that people get question prompt lists that are very specific to their situation. So when they have their next consultation, they get questions they can ask their doctor. So that way, we had one patient said, well, actually, OWISE is like a buddy to me because my diagnosis, and I'll just show you, this is a type of leaflet that clinicians give to patients over time. They give it at the first moment of diagnosis, and there's a couple of questions, or a bit more than a couple, there are about 18 profile questions that can be filled in as and when people know this information based on the pathology and the tumor characteristics. But this particular patient said, the user said, she said, well, actually, it's like a buddy to me because my diagnosis changed. And hey, I got new questions in my question prompt list to ask at my next consultation when I go back in. So it lives with the patient. It's a dynamic tool. And this is probably to say, what, again, I heard today, and what I think is really important, when we try to collect PROMs and PREMs over time, it's not just an exercise of just pulling lots of information out of people so we can store it in databases, do fantastic analyses on them and really understand how to improve outcomes in cancer. That is one thing that's great. But you can only do that on a large scale if you win the trust of patients, if you give them something that they truly need. If they have a tool in their hand, and we have other people who pick up their iPads and say, well, it's mine, you know, this is my tool, this is my buddy. And that's, we want to give something to patients first and then in an engaged way, extract on the go, useful daily information with their authorization and consent for the use that can be collected in database for the use of further research. So that's one way of how we approach this. Well, the first version in breast cancer was launched in 2013 in the Netherlands. We had really good response. Immediately an evaluation study was done at one of the academic medical centers there. We had 90% of the patients who said, I would recommend this to breast cancer patients, but also 90% of the clinicians who said the same thing. So one of the clinicians said, not only is the doctor-patient dialogue improved, but I can see that the actual users of OIs are more advanced with the emotional processing of the disease, because the physical side of things seem to be taken care of already, much earlier in the process than usual. That study by the University Medical Center Utrecht in the Netherlands was published last year in the Journal of Medical Internet Research. And this is just one, this is a study on our own tool, but there's another dozen of studies that demonstrates that the type of tool that we've developed, including the question prompt list, including the consultation audio recording, all benefit patients' quality of life. So we can already see that a lot of features that we've built into this app already improve quality of life. And then the latest publication by Ethan Bass showed that if you start to collect patient-reported outcome data, can alert the clinicians that particular side effects need to be taken care of, you can actually start to extend overall survival. So that's one of the next things. Obviously, the alerting is going to be part of this particular CIC proposal. We're going to, with the CIC proposal and with the plan, we're going to make sure that OIs can actually be integrated in electronic patient record systems and with the Scottish system, so that we can actually, the clinician can immediately see these patient-reported outcome data. There's a lot of other questionnaires that we can add in addition to what we have already. There's a mailbox in the app, and we can contact people on their push messages that can be accessed. And so people can fill out these details. We can merge the data at the back end, so we can make it all very easily integratable, let's put it that way. And that's really part of what we want to do now, and the automated alerts are really useful to improve the treatment outcomes straight away. It's part of the NHS Digital App Store. We're the only cancer app that is in there right now. We were in there from day one that the Digital App Store went live, and that was really useful. It was a very stringent audit that was done, particularly on clinical safety, privacy, and security. It's free for patients. It sounds all a bit too good for true, isn't it? It's free for patients, free for clinicians, because we want to make sure it's widely adopted, widely used. We believe there's really, in the fully anonymized aggregated data, that this is just an example of how the patient-reported data can be seen. Clinicians can actually be receiving this right now with a single push of the button of a patient who uses this dashboard to enter it. Single push of the button, and in real time, the clinician can actually access this, hover over the graphs, immediately see what this level of side effect was that the patient fed into the app. And in that way, there's a much more accurate view of how patients actually, even better than the recall, how they respond to treatment. It really, for us, the business model and why we're here also is in the data analysis. We actually look at how to improve clinical outcomes and how that can actually be used throughout the whole, in the cancer world. So it means that the insights to the fully anonymized data, insights from the analysis of fully anonymized data, that's going to be useful for us to actually have a business model based on. So that's where we work on. Oh, I just didn't want to leave without showing a little bit of data. This is data on chemotherapy from OIs, obviously. The Netherlands versus the UK. We were live in the UK. We were launched last year. It's been used particularly in the London area a lot. We can already see that the particular differences in the prescription behavior of particular types of chemotherapy. CMF is a particular type of chemotherapy still used in the Netherlands, not used here, but very good for a certain type of people, certain type of cancer patients. But for the anthracyclines, a type of chemotherapy that's used on both sides of the pond, we can already see that if you look at side effects, sleep quality, fatigue, physical effort, appetite, there are some real differences on the different sides of where to use, and why we need to look into much further. This is early data that came out, I think, in February, so we need to actually start really delving into the details of it, why this happened. So we have already this type of prompt data, really, really exciting. We're going to expand on this, and this is really what we want to do with you guys here. So we continue to work with lots of patients from day one, as we have. We're really pleased to expand on that here in Scotland, to integrate it with the nation that's so data-driven, and that's something we really like. So we can't wait to get this going. Thank you so much.
My name is Maddie Corton. I work for SideKit. I've worked for SideKit for the past 5 years with loads of joy. We're a digital health company going towards digital identity company. I see many faces here in the room of people I know and we've worked with. So I won't give you a very lengthy introduction, but if you have any questions about SideKit, then please do know to come find us and have a chat, because we're always very happy to meet new people and old people too. That's camel news. So, I'll keep it very, very short because there's questions afterwards, and we'll do that. But we are absolutely super excited to be here today because it's a fantastic opportunity. We are here specifically because over the past 5 years, we've been working with teenagers and young adults with cancer. And we've not been on this journey alone. We've been doing this with Teenage Cancer Trust and Macmillan, University Hospital Bristol NHS Trust, and partners in the Southwest. So why this particular group? It's often a group that's forgotten. It's roughly teenage young adults, 16 to 24 years. These are people that are especially vulnerable. They go to school, they've got family life, they've got relationships. They're growing mentally as well as physically. And then they're diagnosed with cancer. And it's quite a unique path within, a unique cancer pathway. What the project partners have found is that every person's needs are individual. You need individualized support. And this is, as most of you know, also known as holistic needs. So without describing the whole project, it's basically been a co-engagement approach over the past 5 years to define what sort of data do we need to collect, how do we support people the best. And this is all based on the young people themselves. Clinicians also said, well, for us it's been really challenging to speak with our patients because, we're grown-ups. They are teenagers, young adults. They find it very difficult to open up to us. So we need digital tools to facilitate that conversation. So what we're going to do is pretty much the same as everyone here today. Is we're going to see how we can use what's already in existence for, in Scotland. Because obviously the Scottish situation is not exactly the same as in England, and also no patient is the same. So a TYA patient is not the same as an adult cancer patient, and again, that's a generalization. Every person, every patient has unique needs. And we have a specific focus on using data and data collection, which is already facilitated through existing systems, our own, but also like the other people in this room today. So we know data can be collected. It's really about thinking with the appropriate stakeholders. Now, how do we use this data to actually improve these outcomes? Not just for Scotland, but also on a national and ideally international basis. This is a bit about how we do it. That's in our project plan. I won't bore you with that too much, but if you have any questions, then please do know where to find us. So this is a really clever video I prepared that has no audio. But I was thinking maybe I can show it anyway because it has text on screen. Does that work, yeah? So this is a project in the southwest in England where it's been piloted, but it's a generic product that could be brought to Scotland. However, the Scottish landscape is more versatile, if you like. There are already existing solutions in Scotland as well. So we don't want to be prescriptive and say this is what you're going to use. IAM Portal will be launched in Scotland anyway. There are existing rollout plans that we don't interfere with, but we can definitely bring together existing services.
Just use the audio from my laptop. People are happy.
So everyone be really quiet.
Oh, it's not showing.
Oh no.
Look, I wish hear about technology and the technology is failing us. Apologies.
I should have prepared that dance.
For some strange reason, my display settings just keep resetting itself.
TYA-specific holistic needs assessment. IAM stands for Integrated Assessment Map, and it's a way of us understanding the impact of the diagnosis, treatment, and the whole life experience of each young person while they're going through cancer. And it helps also to inform us as to where we need to focus our support. It was designed for young people and by young people. There was a huge amount of involvement from young people when it was first designed. The IAM can be used at all different stages with young people, right from diagnosis through treatment and then into aftercare. And it can be done either in partnership with a young person, or the IAM can be young person led or professionally led. So within the IAM portal, we've developed a website called Help I've Got Cancer, and this is designed as a one-stop shop for young people to find advice, information, support and resources. It's also there for the supporters of teenage and young adult patients too. And it can be accessed straight through the IAM portal just by clicking through, and there it is. And all the resources and information are under various different categories, and this is really here to try and promote supported self-management. So we've had such positive feedback from young people about the IAM. It's just a brilliant tool for initiating conversations with young people, and also for introducing and normalising topics that can be quite tricky to raise, so thoughts and feelings, sex, sexuality and fertility. I often reiterate to young people that this process really helps us to get to know them better, so that rather than us offering standard support to everybody, we can really tailor our support to offer them the right support at the right time.
So, I'm being really awkward, aren't I? Do you want this one?
No. I was waiting for the music to finish.
So this is a project that's in flight, and that's going to be rolled out to Scotland. But there's another really exciting project that's happening in Scotland at the moment, and that's by the MSN Managed Service Network for Young People with Cancer in Scotland. And some of you might have heard about this as well. It's called the MSN app, My Story Now app. And that's another product. You've got loads. So what's a really exciting opportunity now is to use the lessons learned and the existing solutions that are there to leverage to the next level, if you like, to achieve the aims set out in the SBRI. One of the things that's mentioned today, for instance, is that feedback loop. Like if you send the information to your clinician or to your clinical team and it's an anonymous interface, you don't get anything back other than maybe a thank you for your submission. You're very likely to completely alienate the patient. So there needs to be a feedback loop. And it's essential that the input from the patient is central to the MDT, the multidisciplinary team meetings as well. So it's not necessarily less work initially for clinicians, but it does make care more efficient and more person-centered. However, I'm not here today to sell you the IAM portal or the MSN app, because these are products that are in flight. What I am is trying to show you what's already there and what we can build on, so we don't reinvent any wheels. So the MSN app, led by Professor Hamish Wallace and the MSN team in Scotland, is personal health records for people with cancer, especially in this case young people with cancer, that enables them to directly have their own personal copy of clinical information. And this project will be rolled out from December. So it's currently being piloted, if you like, on a small scale, and will then be released to a large audience from December. So, as I said, if you have any questions about either solution, then please, we are project partners in both solutions, technical partners in both. So please know where to find us. But what we are specifically interested in now, and especially listening to everyone today and their input and feedback, is how do we leverage both solutions? How do we bring together what's there? How do we work with Scottish policymakers and charities and patients? So Dan Loach, my co-worker, who is R&D manager, has written some initial thoughts on user stories that we'd like to research, if you like.
Yes, and some of these user stories were written very quickly at lunchtime in response to the issues that were raised in the different discussions. So I'll just start with this one. It's very exciting that the news that the person-held file is in development, well, in pilot phase. And so that brings us to a key user story, which is, as a teenager or young adult, or in fact any person with cancer, I want to have my PREMs recorded in a personal health record so that I can access them from the same place that I access all my health records. That's kind of the definitive advantage of a person-held file, is that all of your health information is in one place to do with as you wish. It's your data. So, as was said, one of the standard forms of interoperability is FHIR, and CIC's been involved in using FHIR quite extensively on our product, the eRedbook, getting health records about immunisations, reviews, screenings from the different clinical systems of the NHS, and sending them to a personal health record. So we've got quite a lot of experience in that domain, and part of this work package could be to convert PREMs or PROMs or any patient-reported outcomes into FHIR messages, and then the question is, well, what FHIR resources did you use? So that would be part of this work package, so that not only can we send PREMs to clinical systems, but we can also send them to any kind of personal health record that uses this standard. So as a young person, I want to share my IAMs with my family or carer so that they can know what's going on in my life and support me. If you think about sending patient-reported outcomes to clinicians, that's great, because they can make medical decisions to help you. But your immediate circle of care, of course, also includes your family members, because they're on a daily basis. They're there on a daily basis. So if they know how you're feeling, what's going on with you, then they're in a position to provide immediate support and care for you. So that's something we're very interested in looking at more. But of course, this raises a whole host of issues. And this was something that came out of the session this morning. Obviously, a big issue is information governance, sharing some IAMs, but not all. So the IAM is one of these areas that the young person reports on. It could be talking about how their family relationships are, or how they're feeling in their relationships with people. So a young person, or any kind of person, might want to share some of these aspects of their life, but not all. So that's obviously something that we've got to look at very closely and consult with NHS experts and other experts to make sure that that's done right, and that the technology supports revoking privileges, changing things you're sharing. And then, of course, there's the issue of ownership of data and who owns the data. And one of the things that came out of a talk this morning was the question, when do you start eliciting these patient-reported outcomes? Do you do it when treatment starts? Do you do it when someone is diagnosed? Someone made the point that ideally you want a baseline measure of the individual so that you can kind of, okay, what are we starting with here? And of course, a personal held record facilitates that, because an individual may have been, unfortunately had a sickness before and may have filled in all sorts of PROMs or PREMs, and so that does provide the baseline so that if they have it in their person held file, they can share it with their new carers, their new health professionals that are with them on this new care pathway. And the other side of that is the carer, obviously, I mean, that's why the patient wants to potentially share these patient-reported outcomes or PREMs, but also the carer will want them so that they can support them and provide a backup of information if necessary. Issues that opens up is how do they view those data? Of course, we could produce a plethora of apps, and for each one of those apps that collects a PREM or a PRO, we could create a carer interface so that they could view the data. We could produce a patient-facing interface, sorry, a parent-facing interface, or we could potentially send the data from all of these apps into a personal held record and have that shared, have the person held record shared with the carer.
Dan, I think we have to wrap up soon.
Oh, sorry. I was getting carried away.
So I think it's clear that there, you know, it's not so much that the systems are not there. As we've seen today, there are systems there that can collect data. They all have, you know, benefits and maybe some things that they could improve on. What's really key now is that we see, okay, what can we do that creates synergy between existing systems to benefit the patient. And we do that by collecting data more routinely, but also with more input. So I think there's loads more here, but Dan will be here till April, right?
Yeah, sure.
So if there's any questions about...
Sorry, did you just say 8?
Yeah.
Well, go no.
So if there's, you know, if there's any sort of need for more discussion, or if there's any questions, then please do know where to find us, because we can go on about this forever.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Dave Fitch. I'm head of operations at the Data Lab. Staff tells me what to do. In a nutshell, that's one of my main jobs. So I guess the point of the next kind of half hour or so is for you to talk to our companies here and get a better understanding of what they're interested in, and hopefully find some ways where you may be able to work to help them develop their feasibility studies. I believe we have 2 microphones. Yes. So who would like to start? Who's got a question? Come on, don't be shy. Aileen, right in the front.
Well, I've got a few questions, but I'll start with one for Adrian, if I may. You mentioned the development of a kind of library of PROMs, identification of new PROMs and PREMs that could be tailored to the individual patient. And I just wonder if you could say a wee bit more about that. It came over to me as rather pick and mix, in that, you know, I'm struggling with then how you would establish the baseline for that patient, and indeed the device to be able to evaluate, you know, what you're doing if you don't have regular prompts that make them respond.
Good question. I think some of them, obviously, people have got, you know, both with comorbidities as well. You know, potentially there's slightly different question sets you want to collect from people, and you know, a lot of the question sets are very fixed, maybe in their capability, and it's about identifying actually are there different ways we can ask the data, ask the questions. What they are, I don't know. I'm not a clinical person or a psychologist or anything. You know, I'm just a mere engineer. But it's how does our platform manage And it wasn't really for every different patient, it was really for each kind of disease group, if you like. So in this instance with cancer, and there's probably a limited number. But there's also different PROMs at different stages of care as well. So whilst you're receiving treatment, that may be a different set of patient-recorded outcomes to when you're on follow-up.
Yeah, I absolutely get that, and that's fine and helpful clarification. But I think you do need at the beginning of whenever you initiate the patient-collected data, have to build up a certain amount before it's going to tell you anything. So I don't think it would be okay, for example, to say to one patient with breast cancer, suit yourself how often you fill this in. So you get one doing it every 6 months and another filling it in weekly.
Oh, right, what I probably said was the system's capability to be able to adjust that for different PROMs, not necessarily that you would use different times for different patients. Yeah.
Okay, next. Right in the back.
Thanks. At least a couple of the presentations talked about the levels of satisfaction with the systems that they were offering. But what was the sample for that? Was that people that were actually engaging with the system, or was that all the people that were invited to take part? So could you say something a bit about that? I'm just thinking about accessibility of systems to all people that could potentially benefit.
Yeah, I think you and I said about patient satisfaction, maybe they'll get this figure of the sample size.
Yes, so the evaluation study was done on a relatively small sample. It was around 15 patients and 12 clinicians. Having said that, there was 9 out of 10, so it was 13 out of 14 of the patients were all very happy to, actually would recommend this to other breast cancer patients. That was that particular survey or that particular evaluation study. We continued here in the UK when it was launched last year with a study with UCLH, and the response there we had, it was very easy to use, very easy to implement. Obviously they did ask patients if they wanted to use it, so it wasn't necessarily that every patient was obliged to use it, so it wasn't compulsory. But having said that, there was all the patients who were asked were happy to contribute. So the patient satisfaction is high, but for those patients who want to use a tool like this. So obviously it's very good to have a discussion about it, how to actually broaden it for also people who may not initially be interested or inclined to use digital tools. But based on our experience, when we talk to a whole sort of across the board different people who are dealing with cancer, we have certain people who say, like patients who say, I don't even look at the internet. I don't want to go there. I don't want to touch it. And these are highly educated people who don't want to go there. And they said, I'm just having this conversation with my clinician. And for them, it's obviously a slightly different story. So for them, we would make sure there's a tool that they can just use to fill in the PROMs and the PREMs that would need it to be collected. So yes, obviously, digital tools are not for everyone there today as it has been used by some people now. Our age gap was, I think, from 50 to 64, it was quite easily used. But we see over time, and that's one of the things we do internally, we prepare for the future. So we know the cancer patients of tomorrow will be the ones who are on their mobile phones today, all day.
I think from our sample size, it was 74 patients in Lanarkshire gone through the solution that represented that satisfaction rating. But they all had to be patients who were willing, who had email and web browser, happy to use that. The challenge is, to go to more accessibility, which we do for older people for COPD and heart failure, you do need more specific accessibility offerings, and they cost more. And the reality is that the NHS doesn't want to spend that. So there's a lot of talk about accessibility, but
Yeah, I have one more comment to make, which was really striking, and perhaps Peter has a view on that, but was that with the Ethan Bash study that was presented at ASCO on overall survival, was actually the computer illiterate group who had a bigger effect on the improvement in overall survival than the computer literate group. So I'm like, it's fantastic that you can actually achieve a bigger result in a population who isn't that used to using digital technology. So.
Can I ask a dumb question? We always assume that young people are very keen to use technology. Has that been your experience?
Well, you can't generalize, can you? In very general terms, you'll find that some groups of people prefer using digital and some prefer face-to-face. I think what set this particular project apart was that people were not forced to do a digital solution, whether it's a website or an app. The clinician would do it for them, or they would do it together. What clinicians would find is that patients would look at their phones, because they're young people, they didn't really want to talk, so they were just looking on their phones and the clinician was trying to get straight to them. So they found that using a digital tool was actually make it a lot easier to interact. But that's not, this tool was specifically created for TYA. It can be made generic quite easily. And some people prefer, well, if you just go onto a bus or somewhere on the street, you see people looking on their phones, and people just sometimes find it easier to engage with an app than with a real person when it comes to complex emotions, I suppose.
Yeah, I think to say around the usability demographic side of it, the inflammatory bowel disease project, just by the nature of Crohn's and colitis, it's a younger demographic that tends to be affected by that. We didn't actually see, and this is more anecdotal than academic research, but we didn't see much difference in terms of engagement between the two different groups. It's not purely age, there can be a preference, and particularly when you're dealing with health, there can be a preference around just what tools you use and whether you want to have face-to-face versus digital. We did find that the support of people using the tools was quite important. And in the case we had again, not directly in the project, but part of one of the focus groups was a breast cancer patient who had learning difficulties, who needed support and understanding beyond simply, well, we're going to make the app a bit simpler. And even and almost regardless of that, back to the flipping comment I made about the relationships question, people's understanding of these things. We need to do a lot of work to make sure that people actually understand what they're filling out and giving the most appropriate answers.
See?
Yeah.
I was going to add a point to that.
On you go then.
Yeah, David and myself deal in different clinical areas, and in the palliative care, which might have some bearing on the cancer one, I heard the term used this morning, brain fog, and there's a similar situation quite often with palliative patients who are on quite strong drugs and feeling particularly unwell, and that in itself is a hurdle. But one learning we did get out of it, and we're dealing with that in the second phase, is it sort of sums up a topic that was also touched this morning, is the instinct all the time that the technology is going to solve our problems without us doing anything. And one of the doziest learnings we discovered is early on they didn't teach the patient, who tended to be elderly, how to use a tablet PC. They didn't even know how to switch it on, but somehow they've been sent home having been shown how to use an app by someone holding it in front of them. So I think there's add-ons to anything you actually put into practice that you really need to think through, otherwise it's just not going to happen.
Just to follow on from that, our observation has been that it is more nuanced than old people don't use technology, young people do. Actually, often young people won't care about contributing data because they believe that somebody else should be doing that stuff for them. Actually, the biggest driver to engagement for us is how the technology is baked into the care pathway. So the tech needs to be flexible, so that if the way that it's being introduced is as a clinical tool, this is part of your care, it's like having an x-ray or a blood test, then somebody needs to take the time to explain to the older person who might struggle how it's going to work. They're really not going to be able to engage from home, or the tech needs to allow their son, their daughter, their relative to get the prompt to go and help them. And if that can't happen, well then she's going to need to come back into clinic to be helped to do it. So I think it's all about how the tech fits into the process and what we're trying to achieve. But just sending technology out into the community is never going to get great engagement.
My point actually leads on from that in that
it's clearly, this is not a technical problem or challenge, it's people and process often, and it's making it work. And I wanted to come back to David. We've heard a lot today about integration with existing systems, one portal, all of those key things. There's 14 health boards, they all make different decisions. Oh my goodness, this is just too big a cake to go and eat. You've obviously had experience with the e-Red Book, which is integrated with existing systems. Sorry, sorry, Maddie. You've had experience with the e-Red Book, and that integrates with existing systems. So I just wanted to ask for the ray of hope that this is absolutely doable, that you can integrate with existing systems, you can build a holistic system that makes a difference, just to I guess, put that spin on it.
Yeah, we need to really stop thinking in systems and solutions, because anyone can build anything. It's all about data. It's a bit, I mean, it's a data lab, but it's all about data, and having that data secure, having the data accessible, easy to enter, having a feedback loop between the person who enters it and the person who reads it. But you know, as long as we use open data standards such as FHIR, and obviously the Red Book uses FHIR quite extensively. For those unaware, we've created a child health messaging standard for NHS London. There's 32 standard messages, if you like, that are outputs and inputs into clinical systems. Sorry for being a little bit slightly technical, but it all uses FHIR. And as long as we understand that any system can produce or understand these FHIR messages, we do not have to worry too much about which systems to use, as long as they are secure, obviously, and as long as they are checked by professionals.
Yeah, I think I'd just add to that, because since you addressed it to me in the first place, we've done some work, not as much as CIC, I don't think, but in those interfacing, and I think it's undoubtedly doable. And the move to standards, I mean, it is accelerating that move to common standards, and we're doing some work actually with a company called Voice Technologies about, again, simplifying the interfaces and just allowing even more systems to have that connectivity and to make sure that information is flowing to everywhere it needs to be. There is, I mean, we've discussed there are issues around, for example, track care is very important, but brought it up in one of the work groups that it's it's at a different level of implementation across different boards at the moment. So therefore, Grampian, when we speak to them, they're very keen, to have that level of integration. Highland, a bit less so, because they're still working on the details of how track care actually just operates with what they've got. So there will be that nuance there, but I think overall, and if we're looking in a 2 to 3 year time frame, then I don't think we've got a problem there.
Peter.
So a question to any member of the panel who wants to respond. So there's been a lot of credibility given to the work of Ethan Bash, who's demonstrated that routine use of PROMs can be effective at improving outcomes, and there's various other similar examples. So do you have any thoughts about how you're going to demonstrate the impact and clinical effectiveness of any solutions that may emerge from your programmes?
Replicate his work, essentially. Use the methodologies and approaches that they used, and Taylor's is a great example to replicate it here and see if we can match what MSK achieved.
It would be fantastic to do the same thing, but it's quite difficult in a way. The reason why it's difficult is one of the problems we ran into it was in the Netherlands, for example, is actually you're looking at a group of clinicians who say we don't want to actually lower the standard of care. We know this is a validated system, it's pretty good to use it. We actually want to prescribe it to everyone. We don't want to do an RCT. So I think we need, and I'm not a clinical trials expert, but we've been talking a bit about it internally. My brother's an epidemiologist, but and so we really want to see how we can collect essentially real-world data with this, and rather than making it an RCT, we need to see if we can do a slightly different study, but showing the effectiveness. So I agree, it's a challenge. We would love to do the same study, follow up for 5 years in an RCT, some people on, some people off, all-wise. But today, that is a much bigger challenge, so I would love to exchange some ideas with you at some stage.
Sorry, just to
Yeah,
clarify. I wouldn't suggest, given we've got the results of this RCT, I wouldn't want to be excluding a control group from the benefits of this research. I wanted to replicate his work, wholesale across the board, and hopefully see those results as compared to historic data. So we see those results coming through prospectively. Not a fan of repeating research.
No, but we have new systems. We are asked this. Our system is obviously slightly different from what they had. They had a slightly old-fashioned, if I like, web-based portal that they use with a nice alerting system. But we have much more sophisticated, much nicer, user-friendly patient engagement tools. So I think our effect would be bigger than Ethan Bash's, and I would love to show that. But I need to find a better way. We need to find a better way to demonstrate that, and I don't just have that in my head right now. So I would love to say that's the answer, but I'd love to discuss it.
I think the funds, it's whether the funds are available to do that type of research, and there isn't really. But the other way of doing it, actually, look at population health intelligence. Let's look at the wider population, and let's do it on, instead of including, excluding, control intervention, let's do it, we do it, and then we match cohorts across the patch. That's a much cheaper way to do it, and you've already got the data. Suggestion.
I think if I just make a really quick point, is that what makes this SBRI so brilliant in a way is that it actually involves not just industry or patients, but also academia. I think all of us will be working with a university, at least one university, as part of a project advisory board. And obviously we'd love to talk to other academia as well. So they're really an integral part of that first phase, if you like, and they can help shape these notions better.
I think that's exactly it, and I think it's part of the project, this evaluation process, and I think we do have to work on it as to exactly how that's going to happen. I mean, particularly because we could be dealing with a very wide range of PROMs and PREMs coming from different sources as part of this. So I think it's there's a huge challenge there, but I think it's, if we can address it perhaps together, as part of this project, then we'll find something that we can. Ultimately, we need to agree that the outcomes of whatever study we do are universally accepted, or as far as we can. So that's, I think the maximum dialogue we can have over the next, 9 months, that's the best thing we can do, I think, is discuss what would make a success and define that success.
And also, sorry, slightly last point, because I agree, but also the data that we are collecting is not new. These surveys are not new. We are actually using validated PROMs and PREMs with input from clinicians and academia. So it's not like we're starting from scratch with wondering what should we actually ask. So that does give us a head start, all of us.
And actually, it seems like the likely cause of those incredible results is less about the analysis of the data, the understanding of variation, and driving up overall quality. We'll get there. It was more just about using the tool. My understanding is more about using the tool as a way to better engage with patients. So you're not just sticking to seeing patients when you randomly manage to book them in 3 months' time. You're actually able to proactively respond to them. And that's actually less about which scores, which measures. It's more just understanding as patient X's nausea increase such that they're more likely to fall off their chemotherapy or pitch up to A&E and end up admitted with a hospital-acquired infection. So I think you don't necessarily need to wait too long to see some of these benefits going through, but completely agree that collecting the validated data to produce the study results to back it up over the long term is sensible.
Hilary?
Well, actually, Tim's articulated the point I was going to make, but I just wonder, and it's a very small point, looking at the Lanarkshire work, that came out of the TCAP funded project, and although the main focus of that work isn't the tool, that's part of the whole TCAP thing. I just wonder if there's any mileage in the evaluation, because there's a lot of money going into the evaluation of the TCAP stuff as part of that national programme, to see if they can do any sub-analysis about the tool along these sort of lines. Maybe you've got a real opportunity to do something along there. I don't know, Debbie Proven, if she's still here. It's Debbie. If she can maybe pick up on that.
Thank you.
She's tweeted about how good it was.
The TCAP project just reported last week, and it kind of was about the tool itself rather than in terms of whether or not it was so they didn't offer a paper tool. They were only using the dockable system, so it was about how they could integrate that within the pathways and enable them to get the patient-reported outcome measures as a result of it. They used a specific tool, the Spark tool, as their sort of to inform their practice, which has a huge number of holistic outcomes, looking at physical, practical, emotional, spiritual, relationship concerns. So we can pull a lot of information from that. I guess the thing was that it was quite a small number of patients that they actually used and reported on, because it was the lung cancer population that they were working with. So I think I'm trying to think exactly what their figures were, but I think it was sort of 40 or 50 patients that they ended up reporting on in the end, because they only had a 20% uptake. But when you looked at the patient group that they were working with, as lung cancer outcomes are, there were about a third of the patients had passed away within the year after they had invited them to take part in the study, and they were asking these patients to fill in the Spark tool every 28 days over a 6-month period. So it was quite a long intervention that they were asking with, but it was quite interesting because what they found was that the number of concerns that were reported started to decrease after the second interaction, and really continued to decline right up until the 5-month point. And then round about the 5-month point, there was a slight increase again. And when they started to look at those individual patients, they found that there tended to either be signs and symptoms of recurrence, or there was seasonal variations, and it was chest infections and the like that they were actually reporting at that point in time. So there was something in terms of what they were reporting that gave an indication as to decline, clinical decline, as well as sort of patient experience and outcomes. So I think they have a lot of data, because they used a lot of other tools round about the Spark tool. They used the FACTEL, and they used the EQ5D and various other tools. So I think there probably is quite a lot that we could pull out from that. And I guess it's just looking at what supports are available to be able to drill down as much as we possibly can. But they did see statistically significant changes in a number of the domains that they were measuring in. So it is definitely an interesting group to look at, I would say.
We got any more questions?
A couple of things that I think may be generic to all 5 of you. I think David mentioned the issue of alerts should they go to patients, clinicians, or both. And we know there's quite a lot written about alert fatigue, particularly in the clinical community. So I just wondered if you should all be thinking about that as you go along. And the second one, and Maddie I think mentioned this in relation to young people, is access privileges. But it won't be, it's not just young people, older people too could be sensitive about their data being shared with family. So again, I'm just putting this to you as a potential issue that you should all be thinking about as you go along. Not necessarily to solve the problem, but just to, you have given it some thought, and we'll see what emerges at the other end.
Any other questions? I think building on what Aileen's just said, does anyone have any advice, given that you've listened to all 5 of these? We've been through all the roundtables. Has anyone else got some advice they might want to give our companies?
Yeah, it's kind of what you were talking about integration with the NHS. It's a very confusing landscape in there, with different people having a say on what will happen, lack of resources, whatever. And there seems to be some merit of small companies, because they usually are small companies, actually working together to bridge that gap. There's people already around doing bits of the chain, and I think it's probably the only way small companies are going to get to do it, because apart from the very big system houses, who probably aren't going to speak to you anyway, I think that there's definitely some merit in that, of finding out who's operating in the field that might be of use in your chain of where you want to get to.
Back. Can I jump in there? Sorry, just to back that up.
Because we're embarrassing our hosts.
Yes. Is this the first time an SPRI competition like this has been run, and what are the rules? And are we? It's a competition, but we're all facing the same, many of the same technical challenges, and you know, how do we balance the competitive aspect and the collaborative aspect? That's the question.
I'm not sure I can answer that, but I have said to the companies that, you know, I've let you all know who the other 4 are before today, and I did it through a blind carbon copy, but obviously, if you guys, it's up to you guys. It is a competition at the end of the day. Only 1 or 2 of you will proceed to phase 2. So it's up to you if you want to collaborate or see each other as competition. But as you mentioned, a lot of you are in like a similar field anyway, and you're all aware of each other. So you are already competition to each other beforehand. So I don't think we can prescribe whether you should work together or you should not talk to each other after today.
Can I just say something about that? Because actually, is that all right? Can I?
All right, go on.
Yeah. Because actually I was a little bit surprised about I'm not saying the highly competitive aspect of this particular program, but because I know a few people, and Adrian and I were together on the NHS Innovation Accelerator, and actually we know we're sort of competing, but actually we see each other more as collaborators, and perhaps, yes, at some stage we may be competing at some stages, but what we found from other programs, and I've known Tim for a while, and we are actually really cooperating with each other, we're helping each other, and one of the things we found from the NHS Innovation Accelerator is that one of the biggest values is us being together, and actually the knowledge we have and we can share and we can help each other. So I would find it a real missed opportunity if we wouldn't actually see this as a collaborative approach. Yes, there's the competition involved, but I feel more comfortable it actually being a collaborative approach with, yes, 2 out of the 5 going through, but I still think we all get much more value out of it if we actually can work together in one way or another. Even perhaps at some stage in our world, we look at, I'm not saying that's happening here, but in our world, we look at a lot of consolidation of different things, and perhaps we can do things together much more cost effectively than doing it separately. So I hope perhaps that's something you could consider.
I think some of it is, as Steph said, there's only funding for up to 2 proof of concepts. You know, the first stage is a feasibility study, and you may say as part of the feasibility study, we have X and Y and we need A, B, and C. There's a bit where kind of it's up to you as to what you want to pitch for at the end of the 3-month period. So, I mean, I'm not going to say you should do this or you should do that. You'll need to make a judgment about what's needed to be successful in the follow-on phase. I mean, some of it is you've got a broad proposal of what you're going to do, and there's a bit where you kind of need to do that, in one sense, because you're not, the point of the feasibility study isn't for you to go off and then kind of do some matchmaking after that, per se, but the point is to explore your options and say what's the best way to go forward to do a proof of concept, and you may say the best way forward is to do this, this, and this. And there's a bit where we're not going to tell you what to do because it's kind of up to you to, it's up to you to pitch to us rather than for us to say you and you should work together, and maybe you and you should work together.
No, but I think
Yes.
Why not?
Sorry?
Why not? Why not do the cherry picking?
That's not the whole point. That's not the way SPRI works. The point is to leave people, the point of SPRI is to let companies innovate rather than say, that's what you got to do, and that's what you've got to do, and that's what you've got to do. So there's a certain point where you need to approach it kind of in that ethos. So we've got another hand in the back.
Just a comment, really. Anne, you mentioned about an evaluation study in a paper in JMIR.
Yep.
And it's just a comment, really, I think, for all the companies to take the opportunity to work with your academic and NHS partners to publish what you're doing. As a digital health academic, we go to the evidence base, but if we can't find what you're doing, we can't include it in any systematic reviews or any analyses that we're doing. So it's really important to build that portfolio of work. And you're all doing lots of similar things. It's, you know, there's lots of kind of crossover, but until we get that evidence-based academics, we can't really begin to evolve the kind of field a bit further on. So just take that opportunity as a bit of advice with your academic and NHS partners.
Yeah, fantastic point. And I think the country lends itself really well to do studies because it's so diverse. It sort of sounds very generic, but I'm giving an example. For example, you have Edinburgh here, or Glasgow, like really highly urbanized areas, and you have really remote areas. And in highly urbanized areas, we have a lot of perhaps digitally savvy people, but in the remotely located areas, we have people who really need it. And we've been starting to talk with Gillian Hailstones, who's at the back, with Maggie's, to really do, in our design of the user groups, we have user groups in different geographical areas. So we have one here, and we have one in Inverness, to see if we can draw people in from the islands, to see how they will use the technology and what their needs are. So I think it would be wonderful to do, you know, studies on that, and start to see where the effectiveness is different or greater, or what the benefits are. And, you know, there's a lot to do. So yeah, I think we all love academic sort of research driving the validation of these tools. So great point.
Any last points, last questions, last comments? It's a bit, Steph, do you want to give people a kind of recap of what the next steps are for PROMs and PREMs, the cancer data, so the rest of the audience understands how this is going to work out?
Yeah, sure. Well, the next steps, I mean, the company's officially started on the 1st of September. They will end by the end of November, and then they will have time to submit their end of phase report and prepare an application for phase 2. They will be pitching for phase 2 to our strategic management group in January, in the middle of January, on the 18th of January. And then phase 2 will start as soon as possible after that. And then that's a 6-month period. And at the end of the 6-month period, they will once again pitch to potential routes to market. Like I said, we have interested health boards in England that want to hear about what comes out of this. We'll be inviting venture capitalists through Innovate UK to attend these pitch sessions as well. So that's the PROMs and PREMs. Last Friday, we launched the competition brief for our next SBRI funding call, which is looking for innovative data science solutions to improve cancer care and outcomes in Scotland. The applications will open this Friday. There's a bit more money in this one. Phase 1 is 5 projects up to 35,000, and phase 2 will be 1 or 2 projects up to 125,000. So that will applications open for that on Friday, and will close on the 10th of November, and we will go through a similar process with this as this. Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank the companies for coming and telling us everything they do, and I'd like to thank Steph for all the work that she's done to get us to this point. So thanks very much.
Thank you.